Hello there and welcome back to the Sleep Science. Tonight you're stepping barefoot into a world so far removed from your own that even your imagination may start squinting at the details. The air feels thicker here, warmer, almost syrupy as it brushes your skin. The sun is brighter than you're used to, and the land stretches with an eerie emptiness. Vast plains of red dust, stunted trees, and rivers that seem to trickle rather than roar. You've just arrived in the Triassic period, about 252 million years ago, a fresh chapter after Earth's greatest recorded catastrophe. A cheeky reality check. You probably wouldn't last an hour in this air, let alone a full day. But don't worry, this is a dreamscape, so you get the comfy spectator pass. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always find it strangely soothing to see the little constellation of where everyone is drifting off together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ground beneath you crunches with grains of baked clay as you step forward. The Triassic world is still shaky on its feet after the Permian extinction, the one event that nearly turned Earth into a barren marble. Historians still argue whether volcanic eruptions in Siberia or methane-burping microbes triggered that cataclysm. But what matters here is that up to 90% of marine species and 70% of land species were wiped out. Imagine the sound of silence that followed. The oceans emptied of their chorus, the forests flattened into deserts. Now, only a few resilient species shuffle across this reset stage, trying to improvise the future. And it's quieter than you expect. No bird calls yet, no buzzing chorus of cicadas. The loudest noise might be the whisper of dry wind against the low scrub or the distant burble of a struggling river. This is the Triassic dawn, eerie, spare, almost minimalist in its biodiversity. The Earth is essentially rebooting, and you, lucky traveler, are here to watch the loading bar creep forward. You cross a valley where the rocks shine with mineral reds and oranges, as if the land itself has been baked in a kiln. Heat radiates up from the ground like an invisible quilt, pressing against your chest. In patches, tufts of horsetails and cycads cling stubbornly. Green punctuation marks in an otherwise rust-colored sentence. You bend down and notice their texture, coarse, waxy, like someone sprayed them with ancient hairspray. They've survived everything the planet has thrown so far, and they're not about to quit now. Off in the distance, a small reptilian figure scampers across the sand. It's not a dinosaur yet, not quite. It belongs to a group of archosaurs, early relatives that will eventually fork into crocodiles on one branch and true dinosaurs on the other. For now, they look like awkward mashups, long limbs too spindly for their bodies, tails whipping nervously as if they're not sure how to balance. You watch one dart from a scrubby bush into the shadow of a rock, pausing to snap at an insect the size of your palm. A mainstream historical fact floats in. This age marks the beginning of the Mesozoic, the so-called Age of Reptiles. Yet here, the reptiles aren't impressive giants. They're modest survivors biding their time, waiting for ecosystems to rebuild. The quirky tidbit: some of the earliest relatives of turtles were already experimenting with body armor, though their shells looked more like flimsy shields strapped onto their backs than the full turtle suit you know today. Imagine someone showing up to a joust in cardboard instead of steel. As you keep walking, the horizon ripples with heat. You could swear the landscape itself is sighing, still recovering from the trauma of mass extinction. And maybe it is. Soil nutrients remain patchy, food chains are fragile, and life is more of a trial run than a finished product. Yet in that fragility lies a strange kind of beauty. Each creature you glimpse, a lizard sunning itself, a fish darting in the shallows, represents a successful gamble against the odds. Every survivor here is an underdog. You pause at the edge of a shallow pool. The water is murky, tinged with iron, but life lurks beneath the surface. Ganoid fish, armored in shiny scales like medieval mail, flash briefly as they turn. Their jaws snap with clumsy determination, chasing smaller prey in circles. Above them, dragonfly ancestors skim across the surface, their wings almost too slow to keep them aloft. These insects are yet the giants of later periods, but their buzzing adds a faint hum to the otherwise barren soundscape. Historians still argue whether this Triassic climate was globally uniform or wildly varied, but the evidence suggests wide belts of desert stretching across much of Pangaea. You feel that dryness in your throat already, like sipping air from a hair dryer. Water is precious here. Life clings to rivers and lakes, and straying too far means a quick end. And yet, as bleak as it feels, the stage is set. The emptiness is an invitation. Species will experiment, mutate, diversify. Predators will sharpen their teeth, prey will bulk up or burrow deeper. The ecological dice are rolling, and the world is about to get very strange. For now, though, you sit on a sun-warmed rock, letting the Triassic silence seep into your bones. The air smells faintly metallic, like iron filings and hot stone. Insects occasionally flicker in your peripheral vision, but otherwise it's still. Almost too still, like the calm breath before a long conversation begins. And you, weary traveler, are ready to listen. You lean back on that sun-warmed rock and let your gaze sweep over the scrubby plain. At first it looks empty, but the longer you sit still, the more the odd little characters of the Triassic creep into view. Survivors, misfits, the evolutionary equivalent of side projects that somehow became the main gig. You start to notice movement in the underbrush, a squat, lizard-like creature waddling with the solemn dignity of someone wearing shoes 2 sizes too big. This is a Dicynodon, a remnant of the once mighty synapsids that had ruled the Permian. They're herbivores with blunt tusks jutting from their beaked mouths, gnawing at tough stems as if chewing celery sticks dipped in sand. The mainstream fact here: Dicynodonts had been the kings of the Permian world, some of them cow-sized or larger, shaping entire ecosystems. But by the Triassic, they're shadows of their former selves, small, scattered, still hanging on. A quirky tidbit: some Dicynodonts likely had skin textures not unlike modern elephants, wrinkly and cracked, making them look like desert grandfathers trudging along the riverbank. You almost expect them to grumble about "back in my day, the forests were greener." Not far away, another figure catches your eye. This one leaner, sharper, moving with quick bursts of energy. It's an early therapsid predator, something like Cynognathus. With a jaw lined in sharp teeth and a body built more like a mammal than a reptile, it represents a different lineage of survivors, the proto-mammals. You watch it pause, nostrils twitching, before it lunges at a lizard skittering across the sand. The chase lasts all of 3 seconds before the lizard disappears into a crack, leaving the predator huffing in frustration. Relatable. The scholarly debate circles around this. Were these therapsids warm-blooded already, or only halfway there? Paleontologists still argue whether their bones show signs of higher metabolism, or if they were still sluggish, cold-blooded ambushers. You lean closer, as if you could solve the puzzle just by watching Cynognathus pant in the shade. But the truth remains hazy, locked inside bones that time has baked and buried. The atmosphere around you is like a casting call, so many roles waiting to be filled. Small reptiles scurry in and out of burrows, looking almost interchangeable, yet destined to split into wildly different futures. Lizards, snakes, crocodiles, even dinosaurs. You notice their variety already, some with elongated limbs, others with stocky, armored backs. It feels like the evolutionary workshop is cluttered with prototypes, and no one, decided yet which model to mass produce. In the distance, a group of early archosaurs gathers by a sluggish stream. Their postures look suspiciously dinosaurish, upright legs, longer strides. Yet they're not dinosaurs, not yet. One of them dips its head and snaps up a fish with a neat, bird-like jab. You can almost hear the foreshadowing music swell in your ears. And then an odd interruption. A squat amphibian, wide-headed and lumbering, drags itself through the mud near the water's edge. These are temnospondyls, holdovers from a time when amphibians ruled swamps the way crocodiles haunt rivers today. They're giant compared to frogs or salamanders, some growing to the length of a canoe. Imagine a soggy couch with teeth. That's the vibe. You watch its thick body slosh forward, its breath wheezing like a tuba left in the rain. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows that exaggerate the creature's forms, turning them into caricatures on the cracked ground. A Dicynodont shadow looks like a tiny elephant with tusks. A Cynognathus shadow stretches into something wolfish. The amphibian becomes a monster silhouette rising from the muck. The Triassic is full of these echoes, creatures that seem familiar yet not quite, prototypes of forms that will later feel perfected. Historians still argue whether this ecological stage was stable or just a precarious balancing act. The evidence in the rocks shows repeated droughts, sudden extinctions, quick bursts of diversification. From your perch, you can sense that instability. It's in the restless way the animals move, the lack of great herds, the small scale of everything. The world hasn't settled yet. It's like Earth is still fidgeting after its near-death experience. You stand and wander closer to the stream, careful not to spook the archosaurs. The mud squelches under your bare feet, warm and gritty. The water has a faint metallic tang and reeds sway gently along the edge. A dragonfly ancestor hovers past, its wings flickering rainbow in the low light. The sound of insects here is not yet deafening, just a quiet pulse, as if the orchestra is still tuning up. For a moment you close your eyes and listen. A dry wind hisses through the sparse trees, insects buzz, and occasionally there's the plop of a fish breaking the surface. No bird calls, no mammal chatter, no frog chorus. It's haunting, yes, but also calming, like the hush before a crowded cafe fills with people. A smile creeps across your face as you picture how odd it would be to plop one of these creatures into a modern zoo. Can you imagine the Dicynodont enclosure? Visitors would stand there, squinting at the tusky potato-shaped animal, muttering, "Wait, is that a hippo that skipped leg day?" Meanwhile, the amphibian exhibit would be advertised as the world's largest wet couch. Not the star attractions, perhaps, but strangely lovable in their persistence. The sky deepens toward crimson as the sun leans against the horizon. The heat lingers, wrapping around you like a heavy blanket. These odd survivors trudge and skitter and splash, unaware that their roles are temporary, that soon larger and stranger actors will walk onto the stage. But for now, they own this moment. This fragile, transitional theater belongs to them. You inhale the warm air again, thick with dust and the faint spice of resin from scattered conifers, and you realize that survival itself, in this raw landscape, is its own form of grandeur. These creatures may not look like much, but they're writing the prologue of the age of reptiles. And you, patient wanderer, are lucky enough to watch them rehearse. The night lingers short in the Triassic, and by the time your eyes adjust to the sunrise, the world already feels baked again. You're standing at the edge of a vast, cracked plateau, the horizon shimmering with heat. The air presses down, dry and gritty, like you're breathing in sand that's been sifted through a furnace. Here, the climate itself is the star of the show. If the strange survivors you met yesterday were the cast, then the stage they perform on is painted in fire and dust. The mainstream fact first. Most of the Triassic world was dominated by deserts. huge belts of arid land spreading across the single supercontinent of Pangaea. Because the landmass was stitched into one colossal chunk, the inland areas had no ocean breezes to cool them. Summers roasted, winters chilled, and rain often forgot to show up entirely. Historians still argue whether the Triassic had monsoon-like pulses of storms, or if drought simply stretched on with cruel indifference. Either way, standing here, you feel it in your bones. The imbalance, the harshness, the sense that Earth is playing hard mode. A quirky tidbit floats into your thoughts. Some fossilized soils from this time preserve the actual imprints of raindrops. Imagine storms so rare that when they did happen, the Earth held onto the memory, like a diary entry written in mud. You glance at the ground beneath your feet and wonder whether the next shower here will etch its story for millions of years. You walk along a dry riverbed, its stones bleached and worn smooth. The banks rise sharply, telling you that when floods did arrive, they came suddenly, roaring like freight trains across the barren flats. For now, though, the bed is as empty as a forgotten road. You imagine ancient amphibians dragging themselves across it after storms, hopping to find puddles deep enough to last a few weeks. Maybe one or two still do, but today the ground is cracked into mosaics that crunch beneath your steps. The sun climbs higher and the color palette of the world sharpens. Ochre cliffs, rust-colored dunes, patches of green where stubborn conifers cling to life. A faint mirage shimmers, and for a moment you swear you see water. But as you approach, it resolves into nothing but heat dancing on stone. Even your imagination feels thirsty. At the horizon, a ridge of rocks looks oddly deliberate, as though someone arranged them like a fortress wall. You scramble closer and realize they're natural formations, carved by wind over eons. Still, they remind you of ruins, a silent city abandoned by time. You sit in the shadow of a pillar and feel the sudden temperature drop. Here, another reminder, deserts are extremes, not just heat but also the stark relief of shade. Animals here survive not by enduring the sun but by dodging it. As you sit, you notice a scuttling sound. A small reptile darts across the sand, its body leaving a delicate track like cursive handwriting. Its destination, a burrow, a tiny refuge dug into the earth. This desert is full of these hidden homes. Without them, survival would be a cruel joke. The scholarly debate lingers in your mind again. Paleoclimatologists still argue over how much oxygen floated in this Triassic air. Some claim it was lower than today, making life sluggish and making deserts even harsher. Others argue oxygen levels bounced back quickly after the Permian collapse. You take a slow breath, real or imagined, and feel the air press heavy in your chest. Either way, it's not an atmosphere built for long jogs. Your mind drifts to modern comparisons. The Sahara, the Gobi, the Outback, they're playgrounds compared to this. At least they have birds calling, camels chewing, human caravans trudging. Here, the silence stretches. Only the buzzing of an insect now and then breaks the monotony. You could shout and hear your own voice echo back at you, bouncing off cliffs that haven't heard laughter in millions of years. Yet harsh as it is, life finds tricks. You stumble upon a grove of cycads, squat plants with tough, spiky fronds. They hoard water in their trunks like hidden treasure. A dicynodont wanders through, nibbling carefully, tugging at the fibrous leaves with its tusky beak. Its footsteps leave soft craters in the dust, each one quickly blurring in the wind. These plants and grazers, locked in their dance of survival, are proof that even deserts make room for stubborn persistence. You continue walking and reach an inland sea, shallow and shimmering under the blistering light. Its edges sparkle with white crusts of salt. The water itself looks inviting, but you know better. It's briny, harsh, unkind to delicate throats. The creatures within, however, have adapted. Strange fish with armored scales, their bodies moving in slow, deliberate patterns. You watch one leap briefly, flashing silver against the hard blue sky, before vanishing back into the murky shallows. A thought creeps in, a joke, really. This is the world's least successful resort. Endless sand, salty pools you can't drink, and zero umbrella cocktails. Unless you count cycads, but trust me, you don't want one blended. The day drags on, heat rippling in waves. You wipe your forehead instinctively, though no sweat beads there in this dreamlike stroll. Shadows shorten until they almost vanish beneath the rocks. Creatures burrow deeper, plants close their stomata, and you're left standing in a landscape that seems to hold its breath. The stillness is so profound it almost hums. And then, as if to reward your patience, a gust of wind rolls through. Dust lifts, swirling like ghosts of ancient storms tracing arcs across the plain. You squint into the grit and realize, this climate isn't just a backdrop. It's an active sculptor, carving dunes, shifting soils, erasing footprints within minutes. Every creature here lives under the constant hand of an artist with no concern for permanence. As twilight comes, the desert transforms. The temperature drops quickly, almost rudely, and the air becomes sharp, biting at your skin. Stars spill across the sky with startling clarity, unmuted by city lights or humidity. You lie back on the cooling sand, watching constellations twinkle, and you feel the contrast. The sweltering day, the icy night, the extremes that define this Triassic climate. The world is still healing, still rearranging itself, but the stage is already magnificent. The desert dawn creeps in again, softer this time, with a faint mist curling along the low valleys. You rub your eyes and step forward into the cool hush, and something is different. There's movement, not just of lizards and amphibians, but of creatures with a spark of ambition in their stride. The Triassic world is about to be claimed by newcomers, the very first dinosaurs. They're not the giants you imagine on toy shelves or in museum skeletons. No towering sauropods yet, no thundering tyrants. These are modest beginnings, creatures no larger than a medium-sized dog, but with a kind of restless energy that hints at what's coming. The mainstream historical fact here: dinosaurs first appeared about 230 million years ago in the Middle Triassic. They were small, lightly built, and not immediately dominant. For a long while, they were just another odd branch among many reptiles, barely noticed by the reigning archosaurs. It would take tens of millions of years for them to become rulers. A quirky tidbit: the earliest known dinosaur fossils include creatures like Aeoraptor, which was only about a meter long, and Herrerasaurus, a predator not much bigger than a human. Imagine trying to hype up dinosaurs in their debut era. Ladies and gentlemen, behold this small chicken-sized runner. It wouldn't sell many movie tickets. Yet here, in this quiet dawn, these tiny pioneers are rewriting history step by cautious step. You follow a rustle in the underbrush and glimpse one. Delicate, slender feathers bristling faintly along its tail and arms. Yes, feathers. Even this early, some dinosaurs wore fuzzy coats, not yet for flight but maybe for insulation. Historians still argue whether all early dinosaurs had some kind of feather-like covering, or if only certain lineages experimented with fluff. You lean closer, curious, but the creature notices you and darts off, feet drumming the earth in rapid taps. Its tail acts like a balance pole, steadying its nimble frame as it weaves through cycads and horsetails. The world feels like it's waking up differently now. The sun climbs over the horizon, striking dew from ferns, and the land begins to pulse with life. You hear sharp chirps, early attempts at vocalization, somewhere between lizard hiss and bird call. You catch sight of a small pack of Herrerasaurus moving through the undergrowth, snapping at insects and tiny reptiles. They're wiry, long-legged, their heads bobbing with alertness. Unlike the lumbering Dicynodonts, these animals carry themselves with purpose, almost like they know the script will soon revolve around them. The air grows heavier with warmth and you move alongside a stream. There another figure pauses to drink, a Styracosaurus, sleek and graceful, its body no longer sprawling like a lizard but upright with limbs tucked beneath it. That's the breakthrough, the dinosaurian posture. By standing tall, balancing weight directly under their bodies, these creatures could move faster, breathe better, and eventually grow larger than their competitors. It's like someone upgraded the hardware, while everyone else was still running last year's model. The scholarly debate continues in your mind. What gave dinosaurs their edge? Was it their posture, their metabolism, their ability to grow quickly? Some paleontologists argue they were opportunists, simply in the right place when others stumbled. Others insist they had unique advantages from the start. As you watch a Storikosaurus dart forward, jaws snapping on a dragonfly with startling precision, you suspect the truth is a mix of both. Timing, luck, and just enough innovation to tip the scales. You sit on a fallen log and notice the landscape itself feels slightly different than yesterday's bare desert. Small clusters of trees dot the valley, their shadows spreading wider. Ferns crowd the edges of the water, offering shelter to insects and small reptiles. The climate here is shifting, still harsh, but with oases sprouting more frequently. Life is pushing against the drought, green fingers threading into the cracks. And in that expanding green, the dinosaurs find room to play. A rustling behind you startles you, and you turn to find a small pack of coelophyses. Slender, fast, with big eyes and alert stances, they remind you of modern birds more than reptiles. They regard you for a moment, necks swaying in eerie unison, before deciding you're not edible and slipping away into the brush. You can't help but grin. If only they knew what reputations their descendants would earn. Hollywood monsters, museum icons, lunchbox legends. For now, though, they're just scrappy little opportunists scurrying through the Triassic. And speaking of reputations, here's a joke to keep you awake just long enough to smile. If you bragged about seeing dinosaurs at this stage, people back home would think you were exaggerating. Dinosaurs? You mean those chicken-sized things? Call me when they're skyscraper-sized. But isn't that the charm? You're catching them in their awkward teenage years before they became celebrities. The sun now beats hot again, chasing away the morning cool. You find shade under a cycad and watch the play of light on the leaves. Around you, the small dinosaurs move like sparks in dry grass, quick, unpredictable, but undeniably alive. They're not yet the rulers, but they carry the future in every stride, every leap, every snap of their jaws. And as you drift into stillness, you realize you've just witnessed the quiet revolution. The first dinosaurs, small and fragile, blending into the Triassic background, are setting the stage for an age that will stretch over 160 million years. The rulers of tomorrow have arrived, though no one here, not even they themselves, could possibly know it. The morning stretches into another shimmering haze, but as you wander farther across the Triassic landscape, the mood shifts again. You've seen the modest little dinosaurs taking their first steps toward history, but they aren't yet the headline act. The real rulers, at least for now, walk on four legs, armor their bodies, and open their jaws with terrifying confidence. These are the ancestors of crocodiles, and their extended family is everywhere. The mainstream fact here: in the Triassic, the crocline archosaurs were far more diverse and dominant than the early dinosaurs. Some grew to the size of buses, others sprinted on two legs like greyhounds. They weren't just swamp lurkers like modern crocodiles. They experimented with almost every lifestyle available. Think of them as reptilian startups, trying every business model before finally settling into the grumpy river monster niche. A quirky tidbit: some early croc relatives, like Proteaceous, walked upright, standing tall on hind legs in a way that would make you swear they were dinosaurs. They weren't, though. They belonged to a completely different branch, which in a way makes modern crocodiles seem like the conservative cousins at the family reunion who gave up experimenting and stuck to lying in rivers. You step into a shallow valley and hear a low rumble, a sound halfway between a growl and a boulder rolling. Ahead, a Protosuchus stalks across the sand, its massive head swinging side to side, teeth gleaming in the sun. It stands over 4 meters long, its hide patterned in scales that catch the light like armor. This beast is no understudy. It owns the stage. Even the scrappy dinosaurs you met earlier keep their distance. Historians still argue whether Protosuchus spent most of its time walking on all fours or upright like a T-Rex prototype. You watch carefully as it shifts its weight, rising briefly onto 2 legs before dropping back to all fours, and you wonder if the truth is that it could do both, a versatile predator in a world of specialists. The air is tense here. You can feel it in the way the smaller animals move, darting, twitching, vanishing into burrows. A herd of Dicynodonts trudge in the distance, tusks flashing in the sun, but they give the valley a wide berth. The predator's presence is like a storm cloud. Even before it strikes, the landscape bows to it. As you skirt the edge of the valley, you notice other crockin too, stranger ones. A slender, 2-legged runner zips past, its long snout snapping at insects in the air. This might be a Sphenasuchian, an early experiment in speed and agility. Not the tank-like crocodiles you're used to, but sprinters, lightweight, quick, darting through the underbrush like oversized road runners. And then near the riverbank, another oddity, Desmatosuchus, a heavily armored plant-eater. Its back bristles with spines like a medieval mace, its body encased in bony plates. It waddles slowly, chewing at cycads with little concern for predators. After all, if you're a walking fortress, you can take your time at the salad bar. You watch it crunch fibers with the slow patience of a cow chewing cud. You sit on a rock and take it all in. The Triassic isn't just a desert world, it's an age of experiments. Dinosaurs may be coming, but right now the croc family is throwing ideas at the wall: giants, sprinters, tanks, semi-bird-like predators. The diversity is dizzying, like browsing through a reptilian catalog that no longer exists. And here's a little modern joke for you. Imagine if crocodiles today had kept their Triassic ambition. You'd walk into a park and see one sprinting past on 2 legs, another grazing like a cow, and maybe one circling overhead with wings. Crocodile zoos would look like Jurassic theme parks, not sleepy ponds with logs that occasionally blink. As the afternoon heat deepens, you follow the river downstream. The water glitters, wide and shallow, and you can't help but notice the drag marks in the mud, long, sweeping lines where armored reptiles hauled themselves into the current. The air smells metallic again, tinged with algae. Every so often, bubbles rise from the surface, hinting at life lurking below. You pause at the sight of another Protosuchus reclining in the shade, jaws open to cool itself. Its teeth gleam like ivory daggers, its breath rising in hot bursts. Even at rest, it radiates menace. You imagine standing before it in real life and can't help but think. You wouldn't even make it to the fight or flight stage. You'd just be lunch with zero fanfare. That's the cheeky reality check. This thing would swallow you before you got to scream out. The sun tilts westward, and the valley hums with the quiet orchestra of insects. The crockin, in all their strange forms, move through the fading light. Some stalk, some graze, some bask, but all of them leave an impression. This is their time. The dinosaurs you saw earlier may be destined for glory, but for now, the Croc dynasty rules the Triassic like a rotating cast of bosses. You stretch out on the riverbank, listening to the low croaks of amphibians, the rustle of reptiles slipping into the water, and the heavy breathing of a predator not far away. The Triassic world may be harsh, but it's never dull. And as your eyes drift half-closed, you realize the odd truth. The ancestors of modern crocodiles were once far more versatile and adventurous than the sleek, toothy lurkers you know today. The river beside you whispers, carrying that story forward, even as the night begins to settle. The night along the river is restless, the air thick with the smell of mud and algae, but as dawn sweeps in, you hear a new sound, lapping waves. You lift your gaze from the dusty bank and realize the water has widened into something vaster. The horizon is no longer dry cliffs and cycads, but a shimmering, endless sea. The Triassic oceans are awake, and they are far from empty. The mainstream fact first. After the Permian extinction nearly erased marine life, the seas of the Triassic became experimental playgrounds for evolution. New groups of reptiles took to the water, some streamlining their bodies into fish-like rockets, others developing long necks or massive fins. These weren't dinosaurs, but marine reptiles, cousins who abandoned land to claim the waves. A quirky tidbit. Some of the earliest ichthyosaurs had eyeballs the size of dinner plates. Imagine swimming in cloudy green waters and suddenly locking eyes with a creature whose gaze looks like a submarine spotlight. Comforting, right? At least you'd see it coming before it decided whether you were worth a taste. You step carefully onto a rocky promontory, the spray of salt water dampening your skin. The sun climbs, and the ocean glitters like molten silver. Then, with startling grace, an ichthyosaur breaks the surface, sleek, dolphin-shaped, its snout bristling with teeth. It arcs through the air and slaps back into the water with a spray that drenches your toes. These predators are built for speed, their bodies more fish-like than reptilian, their tails whipping side to side. You watch another leap farther out, and for a moment it feels like you're at a Triassic SeaWorld show, minus the overpriced popcorn. Historians still argue whether ichthyosaurs evolved from land reptiles that returned to the water gradually, waddling along coastlines first, or whether they dove in head first, so to speak, in a more rapid adaptation. Either way, the result is astonishing. Reptiles that look more at home in the sea than some fish. You imagine their ancestors stumbling clumsily into the shallows and can't help but smirk. Evolution's most ambitious, let's try that again moment. Beneath the waves, you glimpse shadows moving. One long-necked form rises, a plesiosaur, body broad like a turtle's, neck stretching impossibly far ahead. Its head is small, delicate, like it's attached to the wrong animal. The neck sways back and forth as it snaps at schools of fish, weaving through the water like a serpent attached to a raft. It's mesmerizing and a little ridiculous, like watching someone fish with a garden hose. Closer to shore, smaller nothosaurs paddle through the shallows, their bodies long and seal-like. They haul themselves occasionally onto rocks to rest, their limbs splayed awkwardly. Unlike ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, nothosaurs still split their time between land and sea, though the sea is clearly winning their attention. Their slippery movements leave trails on the wet stone, which glisten in the early light. The air itself tastes different here, sharp, salty, briny on your lips. Gulls don't exist yet, but pterosaurs swoop overhead, their wings catching thermals as they scan the waters. You squint at one that dives suddenly, skimming the surface with its long beak, snapping up a fish with a splash. The line between sea and sky feels thinner here, the two realms feeding one another in endless cycles. You sit on a rock and let the surf brush your ankles. The soundtrack is hypnotic. The crash of waves, the calls of distant reptiles, the occasional thunderous splash of something much larger surfacing. You peer into the water and see ammonites, spiral-shelled relatives of squid, drifting like alien balloons. Some are small as coins, others the size of a car tire. Their tentacles writhe, testing the water currents. They're strange, but they dominate these seas. Their fossils destined to litter rocks across the planet, as if signing the ocean's guest book. A joke slips into your thoughts. If you were a Triassic fisherman, you'd need a net reinforced like chain mail. Catch of the day, terrifying sea lizard with dinner plate eyes. Not exactly a comforting menu option. As you watch, another ichthyosaur lunges upward, jaws snapping shut around an ammonite. Shell fragments scatter into the waves and seabirds, no, pterosaurs, wheel in to snatch the scraps. The violence is quick, efficient, and then the sea returns to its calm rhythm. Predators and prey rehearsing the same cycle that will play for millions of years. The scholarly debate touches you again. Did these marine reptiles regulate their body temperature like mammals, or were they cold-blooded like traditional reptiles? The fossils hint at warm-blooded tendencies, perhaps allowing them to range farther, dive deeper, chase faster. You imagine an ichthyosaur diving into the twilight zone of the sea, eyes glowing in the dark, body pulsing with warmth like a living submarine. The thought sends a chill up your spine, though the sun keeps your skin warm. Evening falls slowly here, the horizon stretching wide and orange. The sea reflects it all, turning the surface into molten glass. Out in the distance, the silhouettes of giant marine reptiles leap and roll, their forms breaking the serenity for moments before vanishing again. You can almost convince yourself the ocean is alive, breathing with every crest and trough. You lie back against the rock, lulled by the rhythmic tide. The Triassic Sea cradles life as generously as the deserts denied it. Here, the creatures grow bold, experiment freely, and remind you that while dinosaurs are finding their feet on land, their cousins are mastering the waves in grand, glittering style. You awaken to birdsong, or at least that's what your drowsy mind first thinks. But as you sit up, you realize no birds are here yet. The sound is the rustling of leaves, the whisper of a breeze through branches that weren't standing in the Triassic deserts you left behind. Something has changed. You've wandered into the Jurassic, and suddenly the world feels softer, greener, fuller. The mainstream fact: during the Jurassic, roughly 201 to 145 million years ago, Earth's climate shifted toward warm, humid stability. The continents of Pangaea began pulling apart, carving out new coastlines, birthing shallow seas, and pumping moisture into the atmosphere. Where once the Triassic baked you in endless deserts, the Jurassic lays down carpets of ferns and forests of conifers, lush valleys unfurling like nature's fresh renovation project. A quirky tidbit: fossilized forests from this time suggest that tree ferns sometimes grew taller than a two-story house. Imagine a neighborhood shaded not by oaks or pines, but by giant shaggy ferns, like living umbrellas sprouting everywhere you look. You half expect a prehistoric gnome to pop out and offer you a mushroom as rent. You step into the canopy's shade, and immediately the air changes. It's damp, heavy with the smell of resin and greenery. Fern fronds brush against your arms as you move deeper, their texture coarse and slightly sticky with dew. The ground beneath you is springy, thick with fallen needles and moss. Shafts of light stab through the branches, catching in clouds of insects that hover like golden dust. Historians still argue whether the Jurassic climate was truly uniform or if regional extremes persisted. Fossil records show both tropical belts and cooler, temperate zones, suggesting that the Earth, while warmer overall, had a patchwork of habitats. You find yourself walking through one of the warmer belts, where humidity clings to your skin like a damp blanket. You imagine traveling farther north to find cool breezes, or wandering toward the poles where, even here, conifer forests stretched nearly to the ice. You pause at a clearing where a grove of cycads rises, their thick trunks crowned with spirals of stiff leaves. Their silhouettes are unmistakable, almost like pineapples scaled up into trees. Insects buzz furiously around their pollen cones, and you realize the forest is noisier now than the Triassic plains ever were. The orchestra has arrived. Chirps, clicks, hums, the subtle percussion of beetles drumming against bark. You kneel to study the ground and find horsetails sprouting like green straws, some taller than you. Their stems are ribbed, hollow, with a faint medicinal smell. These plants are living fossils. You'd still find their descendants today, though smaller, tucked away in marshy corners. But here in the Jurassic, they flourish, carpeting entire wetlands. The canopy above is dominated by conifers, towering Araucaria, ancestors of monkey puzzle trees, their branches stiff and geometric. Resin drips slowly from their trunks, catching the light like amber. You brush your hand against the bark, rough and ridged, and feel the forest's permanence. These trees could live for centuries, some even longer, standing silent witness to generations of dinosaurs passing beneath. A rustle breaks your reverie. You glance up to see a small dinosaur, a primitive ornithischian nibbling at the low fronds. Its body is small, covered in bristles, its beak clipping neatly at the leaves. It looks nervous, twitching at every sound as though it knows predators lurk. And predators surely do, somewhere out there in the dense green. You continue walking, deeper into the lushness, and stumble upon a swampy glade. Frogs, real frogs, unlike the hulking temnospondylus of the Triassic, chirp loudly from the water's edge. Dragonflies flit, wings catching the light like stained glass. The swamp smells of damp earth and decay, but it thrums with life. For the first time in millions of years, the earth feels abundant again. And here's a playful thought. Imagine being an allergy sufferer here. With ferns puffing spores, conifers dripping resin, and cycads releasing clouds of pollen, you'd sneeze yourself extinct before the dinosaurs even got the chance. The scholarly debate circles in again. Was this Jurassic greening the true driver of dinosaur gigantism? Some paleobotanists argue that the abundance of ferns and conifers created ecosystems that could finally sustain giants. Others suggest it wasn't just food supply, but climate, oxygen, and evolutionary quirks working together. You look around at the sheer density of vegetation and can't help but think, yes, this looks like a buffet fit for giants. Evening approaches and the forest takes on a golden glow. Resin glimmers on bark, insects quiet their songs, and the heavy dampness of the day lifts slightly. You sit against a massive conifer trunk, the smell of pine thick around you, and listen to the forest breathe. In the shadows, you catch the silhouette of something large moving, but it doesn't emerge just yet. It waits, as if the stage needs a moment to adjust its lighting before revealing its star actors. You close your eyes briefly and let the lushness seep in. After the stark, fragile Triassic, the Jurassic feels like a sigh of relief, the earth finally exhaling after holding its breath too long. And somewhere beyond the trees, the thundering footsteps of giants are already stirring. The ground trembles before you hear anything, a low shiver passing through the soil, up your calves, into your spine, like the planet itself is clearing its throat. You step out from the conifer shade into a wide river valley bathed in morning light, and the sight punches the air from your lungs in the gentlest way. Giants are moving. Not movie-prop giants, not overblown legends, but living, breathing mountains of muscle and tendon, long necks flowing like bridges over the green. They stroll in slow procession along the river's curve, feet pressing circular craters into the damp silt, each print filling with a little burst of water. Ferns sway as they pass, and a flock of insects lifts like pollen confetti, the forest's quiet applause. A mainstream historical fact drifts into focus. These are late Jurassic titans, sauropods like Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, Camarasaurus, and the high-browsing Brachiosaurus, living roughly 155 to 148 million years ago in ecosystems much like the famous Morrison Formation. Their neighbors include plated stegosaurs, those unmistakable walking saw blades whose tracks and bones share the same ancient floodplains. You step closer to the river edge, feeling the ground thump with each measured stride, and you realize just how profoundly the landscape answers to their presence. One Diplodocus, all tail and purpose, glides past at a dignified amble, its head sweeping side to side as if reading the river's surface like a sentence. The neck is long but not rigid. You can see the subtle ripple of muscles, the rise and fall of air, the graceful economy of motion that only a creature born to be enormous can afford. Quirky tidbit: their vertebrae are riddled with air pockets, honeycombed like sponge cake, part of a bird-like respiratory system that kept these behemoths light enough to function. Imagine hauling a ladder all day. Now imagine the ladder breathes for you. On the far bank, a brachiosaurus stands like a living lighthouse, forelegs taller than its hind legs, shoulders pitched high, nibbling at conifer crowns the way you might casually snack from a top shelf. A chunk of branch snaps, resin glittering on the torn end, and the smell of pine and sap floats across the water. Historians still argue whether these giants held their necks raised like swan masts or generally leveled to ease blood pressure. Anatomy, biomechanics, and artery physics all doodled in margins of papers that never quite settle the question. You watch the Brachiosaurus lift just a little higher, and you can't help but root for Team Giraffe pose, if only for the drama. Closer to you, the underbrush rattles with a different rhythm, lower to the ground, more punctuated. A stegosaur steps into the open, tail spiked with a thagomizer that looks like a negotiation-ending device. Its back plates glow with the morning's thin light, reds and browns and muted creams catching along the edges. Those plates have inspired entire forests of hypotheses: display, thermoregulation, defense. Take your pick. The creature sways, head down, beak clipping at horsetails with concentrated seriousness, like a kid methodically erasing a chalkboard. And yes, you've heard the myth about a second brain in the rump. The truth is less flashy. A glycogen-rich enlargement in the spinal canal that once got overhyped by enthusiastic Victorians. If there's a second brain back there, it's the strong, silent type. Another stegosaur lumbers out to join the first, and you spot juveniles behind them, platelets still small and rounded like unfurled fans. They stick to the edges of the herd's shadow, where the ground feels safer and the air cooler. A soft grunt passes between the adults, low, almost bassoon-like, and the little ones pivot obediently. Sauropods stride by upstream, unbothered, their tails trailing like living drawbridges. For a moment, the two dynasties, long necks and plate backs, share the floodplain without friction, as though the valley is big enough for everyone's architectural experiments. You crouch by a print the size of a bathtub. Its rim is sharp, the center puddled, and you can see the faint starburst cracks where weight met mud. A water strider skates across, a tiny acrobat using a giant's footprint as a stage. It's funny in a cosmic way, the colossal and the delicate choreographing together, each at home in the other's wake. Light joke 1. Somewhere a Triassic Park ranger, wrong era, but we're improvising, is writing the world's most feudal ticket. Sir, you can't parallel park your Apatosaurus in the river. The valley itself bears signs of repeated remodeling. Banks slumped where herds have descended to drink, fern fields mown at shoulder height, cycads chewed into spiky topiaries, tree ferns with their crowns nipped flat like someone ordered the bowl cut of the plant world. The giants are not just inhabitants, they are landscape architects. Over seasons, their paths become braided trails, their feeding marks guide plant regrowth, their droppings, let's be classy and call them nutrient payloads, seed downstream meadows with a green firework of life. You inhale and the air is a stew of moisture, resin, and a barnyard hint that might be the most ancient fertilizer ad you'll ever smell. Paleontologists whisper from the edges of your attention. Trackways suggest group travel, perhaps even herding, and some prints hint that juveniles walked closer to the center, shielded by the bulk of adults. Whether that pattern was a rule or a snapshot of one afternoon, nobody knows, but the picture fits what you're seeing. The sauropods keep a measured distance from the stegosaurs, and the stegosaurs keep their tails pointed toward empty space, just in case. Courtesy rules evolve quickly when everyone's armed with either mass or spears. You edge along a gravel bar and find smooth stones scoured by the river. A few are polished to a glassy sheen, and you remember another quirky possibility: gastroliths, stomach stones swallowed to aid in grinding plant matter, have been found in association with sauropods. Whether every giant relied on them remains a debate, but the thought of a creature selecting the perfect river pebble like a chef choosing the right mortar and pestle is charming. Light joke 2. Welcome to the Jurassic kitchen. Today's special is conifer salad, tumbled on granite, served with a light fern vinaigrette. A breeze skims the water and dragonflies drift like slow sparks, their wings ticking against the humid air. Far downvalley, thunder mumbles, maybe a storm, maybe just distant rockfall. The Diplodocus herd pauses, heads lifting in a small wave, then resumes its patient forward spell, tails drawing S-curves that never quite touch the ground. You imagine the soft creak of colossal tendons, the muted drum of footfalls, a lullaby written in earth tones. If the Triassic felt like a harsh rehearsal room, the Jurassic River Valley is the main stage with better lighting and a professional sound system. And yet, even here, questions stack up like plates on a stegosaur's back. How fast did these animals grow? How did their hearts manage skyscraper plumbing, pushing blood up those improbable necks? Did the plates flush with color when emotions or temperatures spiked? Paleontologists still argue whether stegosaurs' plates were insulated radiators, billboards for species and health, or both. You watch sunlight chase a warm blush along a plate's edge and decide that a good sign can do two jobs at once. Light joke 3, whispered so you don't spook anyone. If Fashion Week existed here, stegosaur plate couture would dominate. This season, dorsal chic with ventilated elegance. As the sun tilts, the valley slips from gold to copper. In the shallows, minnows scatter where a sauropod toe submerges like a sinking boulder. On the bank, a juvenile stegosaur tests its thagomizer on an innocent shrub and startles itself with the swish. The air is a little cooler now, the kind of cool that invites sighs. You sit on a smooth log, resin sticky under your palms, and realize you've been breathing in rhythm with the herd without meaning to. Slow in, slow out, a human chest sinking with Jurassic lungs. You think back to the dry Triassic riverbeds and the world's least successful resort of salt pans and mirages. This, by contrast, is the all-inclusive. Food at multiple elevations, water on tap, shade provided by Araucaria umbrellas. Though, to be fair, no complimentary drink with a tiny fern umbrella. The giants don't need one. They drink the river in drafts so slow and certain it feels like time itself pauses to accommodate. The last Brachiosaurus in view turns its head, one deliberate arc, and you have the odd sensation it notices you. A small thing perched at the edge of a giant world, before it eases back to trimming the skyline. The valley hushes to evening, crickets writing soft Morse code in the grasses, and you let your eyes drift half-closed, the earth's gentle tremor still passing through you like a heartbeat you didn't know you shared. A shadow skims the river and ripples your reflection. You tip your head back and there it is, wings stretched from fingertip to ankle, a crescent of leathered membrane catching a rising thermal as neatly as a hand finds a rail. The giant valley you've been walking becomes a mere runway, and the sky suddenly feels busy, layered with traffic you didn't notice until you tuned your ears to it. Soft skin wings whispering, throat pouches clucking, beaks ticking as they snap at dragonflies that don't yet know they're famous. Mainstream fact to anchor you: pterosaurs are the first vertebrates to achieve powered flight, launching into the air tens of millions of years before birds ever tried their feathers at it. They are not dinosaurs, even if their press agent sometimes lets the public think so. They're close cousins, branchmates on that archosaur family tree where the croc line once auditioned for every role. Your eyes track one banking turn and you catch the telltale architecture, an absurdly elongated fourth finger supporting the wing, like evolution took a pinky and promoted it to entire tent division. A pair of smaller flyers ride the valley's late afternoon thermals, flash-white bellies and dark backs, dimorphodon-styled heads with snaggle teeth and big, almost mammalish eyes. They crab sideways on the breeze, then fold and drop like thrown cloaks to snatch something off the water. When they flare, you see the framework inside the membrane, actinofibrils stiffening the wing, a pteroid bone bracing a little leading-edge sail, the perpetagum, that trims the air the way you'd pinch a sheet to catch wind. This is not sloppy hang gliding. This is fine-tuned aeronautics. The breeze carries a tarry resin perfume from the conifers, but up there the air smells like altitude, dry, sun-warmed, almost clean after the barnyard notes of sauropod hour. A long-tailed form crosses high against the blue, tail vein a tidy diamond. Ram 4 hinches in postcard silhouette, the Zollnhofen dream come to life. Somewhere over a quiet lagoon, not far from where you've walked, layers of fine mud will one day press wing membranes, throat pouches, and even tiny fibers into stones so crisp that future humans will gasp at the cheekbones of a creature that never posed for them. You step into a patch of open sand as one glider corkscrews down. It hits the ground quadrupedal, as polite as a heron setting down a teacup, and then, with a push like a coiled spring, vaults back up again in a muscular four-limbed launch. Historians still argue whether they launched bipedally like birds or did this dramatic quadrupedal pole vault. The physics papers duel, the models flex, and your eyes tell you that 4 stout limbs look like a pretty handy catapult. A quirky tidbit flutters by with the next pass, that fuzzy fringe you notice along their necks and shoulders. Not feathers, but pycnofibers, hair-like filaments that probably helped with insulation and maybe color display. Some fossils even hint at branching structures and pigment cells, which implies fashion. Think couture capes that might have popped in early morning light. No offense to the stegosaurs, plate couture from earlier, but runway season in the sky is competitive. Light joke 1. Jurassic Fashion Week strict dress code. Bring your own cape, no feathers required. A broad-headed tapejarid slips in from the tree line, crest blazing like a sail. It wafts to a stop on a boulder, jaws probing a cone, then nibbles at soft plant bits with clinical focus. Flight doesn't mean you only eat fish. The crest is a billboard, species, age, health, vibes, all possibly telegraphed in keratin. Historians still argue whether these crests were mostly for show, for aerodynamic trimming, for thermal regulation, or for the prehistoric equivalent of saying, "I can absolutely carry this look." As the tapejarid tilts, the translucent edge glows, and you can almost hear the applause from every pterosaur that's ever believed in accessorizing. They're social here at least. Over by a low spit of sand, a dozen settle in a staggered line, wingtips lifted like umbrellas as the evening updraft wanes. One scrabbles at the shoreline and reveals a clutch of deflated leather eggs, subtle ovals the texture of soft fruit. Another mainstream fact sneaks in. Pterosaur eggs were leathery, not rigid like many birds, and rare deposits from desert lakes have turned up dozens, hundreds together, hinting at colonial nesting. Babies, flaplings, because we're allowed one adorable term per section, may have hatched ready to crawl and perhaps even fly, a question that refuses to land neatly. Historians still argue whether hatchlings took to the air immediately or lingered in parental day care, building flight muscle like little gym rats with wings. The sun tips lower and insects rise, the air's dinner bell. Pterosaurs answer with looping sallies, mouths like zipper bags opening and closing on luckless beetles. One skims the river skin, and you see the meniscus feather itself back together, a seam closing on a tailored suit. Another drifts so close you can read the topography of its wing. Veins, tiny creases, a nick that healed long ago like a veteran's quiet scar. Light joke 2. Somewhere a Triassic insurance agent, wrong period again. Roll with it is denying a wing wear claim. Sir, that's normal use in a bug-rich environment. They are not all mid-air acrobats. A broad-winged giant ghosts overhead, Quetzalcoatl's proportions or close, shadow falling like a moving island. It doesn't stoop to fish. It stalks the shore with a stride you feel in your knees, javelin beak poised for anything careless. A juvenile lizard, a hatchling, an unwise mammal the size of a mitt. Whether this titan scavenges like a patient vulture or hunts like a stilt-legged heron is another of those dinner-table debates. Historians still argue whether the biggest pterosaurs were bone pickers of wide plains, skim feeders, or stealthy spearfishers. Out here, all three seem plausible depending on where the wind and the snacks are. You remember the Triassic Ocean's ichthyosaur with dinner plate eyes and laughs softly at the symmetry. Down there, submarine headlights. Up here, silent kites that can pivot on a leaf's worth of air. Flight changes the rules. Predators approach from axes your instincts didn't evolve to monitor. Prey learn to check the sky as much as the brush. Plants even angle their cones to maximize wind and wing-borne dispersal. The valley is a three-dimensional chessboard now, and the pieces don't all obey the same gravity. A hum of small bodies thickens above the conifers, mayflies lifting, a dusk bloom, and the pterosaurs become figure skaters in a snow globe. They cross paths within a feather's breadth well, a pycnofiber, call out with guttural yips, and somehow avoid collisions better than modern drivers with 4 separate safety apps. Light joke 3. If there's a celestial air traffic control, it's clearly staffed by dragonflies. 0 delays, plenty of snacks, everyone lands happy. You squat near a crust of baked ripple marks and trace them with your finger. Tomorrow a squall might smooth them, and the day after that a sauropod will step there and push the memory deeper. Above you, a small one lands and folds its wings so crisply you hear the soft pat of membrane on membrane. It shakes, fluff rustling, and you smell a faint musky note under the resin and river, wild, warm, a pocket of sky breath close to the ground. The eye that sizes you up is glossy, assessing, moving rock. Harmless tree. It decides your furniture and hops sideways, probing the sand for beetles that didn't read tonight's hazard forecast. The glow goes copper, then rose. One by one, the flyers angle toward roosts, snags, cliff ledges, the high shoulders of dead trees where wind has polished the bark. Wings become capes, capes become blankets, and the loudest sound left is the river sifting gravel as though counting. You feel that old Triassic dryness for a heartbeat, the memory of deserts. Then the Jurassic humidity slides back in, softening edges, making even the stone look drowsy. Before you surrender to the same pull, you give the sky a last look. The first vertebrate pilots trace lazy signatures across the dimming blue, messages you can't read but feel anyway. Light, lift, glide, rest. Somewhere far ahead, feathers will reinvent the contract, but for now the Skinwing Guild holds the keys, and they cruise the dusk like proprietors checking their house before lights out. You tuck your chin, let the wing-borne hush settle over you, and breathe in time with the night's quiet downdraft. Morning returns with a hum, not the soft whisper of wind in cycads, not the thunder of sauropod herds, but a higher, sharper buzz that fills the air like a woven fabric of sound. You brush dew off your arms and realize you've wandered into the microcosm, the insect orchestra that has been tuning since the Carboniferous, but is now rewriting the score for the Mesozoic. Mainstream fact first. Insects dominated the Jurassic and Cretaceous ecosystems in terms of numbers, diversity, and sheer ecological influence. They pollinated plants, broke down waste, cycled nutrients, and crucially fed everything from early mammals to feathered dinosaurs. Their fossil record is a fluttering archive. Beetles, dragonflies, termites, and more, preserved in amber or stone. Without them, the Mesozoic would be a silent theater with props but no stage crew. A quirky tidbit: termite mounds from this era may have rivaled small hills, whole fortresses of soil and saliva rising above fern fields. Imagine stumbling across one and realizing you're looking at a living skyscraper designed by bugs the size of your pinky. Real estate developers today would weep with envy at that kind of teamwork. You crouch low, eye level with a cluster of horsetails where beetles glint like jewelry. Their shells shine metallic blues and greens, tiny mirrors flashing the sunlight. One beetle clambers onto another's back, wings unfolding with a paper-thin shiver, then takes off in a zigzag that makes you dizzy to follow. The air smells faintly sweet, the aroma of conifer pollen drifting like invisible powder, and the insects respond in clouds, swarming the cones with ecstatic efficiency. A dragonfly passes close to your face, wings whirring audibly, the air displaced in tiny puffs. Its compound eyes glint with 1,000 reflected worlds, and you wonder what it sees when it looks at you. Giant, moving blur, potential tree, or simply irrelevant. These dragonflies are not the sofa-sized monsters of the Carboniferous, but they are still larger than your modern garden variety, some with wingspans the width of your arm. Their flight is acrobatic perfection, able to hover, reverse, and pivot in midair with more grace than any mechanical drone you've seen. Historians still argue whether the atmospheric oxygen levels of the Mesozoic allowed insects to flirt again with gigantism, or whether predators kept them in check this time. The fossils suggest that, unlike the absurd proportions of their Paleozoic ancestors, Mesozoic insects found balance, big enough to thrive, small enough to survive. You swat idly at the air, not from annoyance but to test the density of it, thick with wings and motion. On a rotting log nearby, termites are at work, reducing wood to soil with relentless determination. The log crackles softly as their jaws snap, an almost invisible percussion section beneath the louder buzz. You crouch closer and catch the faint scent of cellulose breaking down, earthy and slightly sweet. If you close your eyes, it smells like the beginning of soil, the start of fertility that will nurture forests for ages to come. A light joke sneaks in. Imagine marketing Jurassic termite incense, a soothing aroma of damp wood and bug spit, perfect for relaxation. Might not be a bestseller in your century, but the ecosystem swears by it. Above you, the canopy quivers with cicadas, early prototypes, not quite the shrill serenaders of modern summers but already experimenting with sound. Their calls are lower, more resonant, like a chorus of wooden flutes. The forest responds. Small feathered dinosaurs tilt their heads, ears catching the noise, perhaps considering it both a nuisance and a dinner bell. You sit back on your heels and notice a pattern. Where insects gather, life gathers. Tiny mammals creep at the edges, whiskers twitching. Lizards flick their tongues, darting for the careless stragglers. Even pterosaurs dip lower through the canopy, their wings brushing branches as they snap up dragonflies mid-flight. The insects may be small, but they hold the strings of the web. The scholarly debate replays itself. When flowering plants finally appear in the Cretaceous, insects will reinvent themselves again as pollinators. But here, in the Jurassic, they are still largely tied to ferns, cycads, and conifers. Some paleobotanists argue whether certain beetles were already experimenting with early pollination, nudging evolution toward that coming explosion. You glance at a cone covered in beetles and wonder. if you're watching the rehearsal for the greatest plant-insect partnership of all time. The sun climbs and the sound grows thicker, almost tangible. You feel the buzz vibrating in your chest, the air alive with the motion of countless wings. The ground sparkles with beetle shells, the trees hum with cicadas, the sky stitches itself with dragonfly flight paths. It's overwhelming and oddly soothing, like the static of an old radio tune just right. Light joke too drifts in. If noise complaints existed here, the beetles and cicadas would have been sued into extinction long before the asteroid had a chance. You stroll toward a clearing where the forest floor has been stripped bare. At its center, a termite mound rises taller than you, a cathedral of soil peppered with tiny doorways. Ant-like workers scuttle along highways in and out, carrying grains of earth, fragments of leaves, specks of fungus. The mound is warm under your hand, almost pulsing, alive with activity. Inside, chambers breathe with heat and carbon dioxide, the hive's silent engine. It humbles you, the sheer scale of cooperation from creatures so small. As afternoon wanes, fireflies begin to blink among the horsetails. Yes, Jurassic fireflies, their signals faint but visible, pulses of light coded in rhythms. They flash once, twice, 3 times, then vanish, a Morse code older than humanity. The valley glows faintly with these secret lanterns, like someone scattered stars in the underbrush. Light joke 3 whispers in. The first prehistoric rave, cicada baseline, firefly strobes, dragonfly aerial show. Admission price, 1 unfortunate beetle. You settle on a patch of moss, letting the insect chorus wash over you. It is relentless, yes, but not harsh, more like a lull, a reminder that the smallest bodies can shape the loudest symphonies. The giants may rule the land and sea, but it is these tiny architects who keep the stage lit, the food chains balanced, the soil fertile. You breathe out slowly, sinking to the hum, and let the forest's miniature heartbeat coax you into stillness. The forest hum fades behind you as you climb a ridge of raw stone. The ground underfoot feels fractured, restless, like a jigsaw puzzle not quite snapped together. You crest the slope, and the view widens, a landscape in motion, not because of herds or tides, but because the planet itself is tearing and drifting. Mainstream fact: during the Jurassic, the supercontinent Pangaea was breaking apart. Rifts tore through its surface, birthing proto-Atlantic oceans, flooding lowlands and carving new coastlines. Volcanic outbursts rumbled along fault lines, pouring lava across valleys. Mountains rose where plates collided, while basins sank, filling with shallow seas. You stand on the edge of that drama, watching Earth redraw its own maps with molten ink. A quirky tidbit: fossilized lava flows from this time sometimes preserve dinosaur footprints. Imagine a sauropod calmly stomping across still warm ash, its prints cooling into rock as if signing the volcanic canvas. Somewhere out there, a diplodocus left graffiti on lava, and 150 million years later, geologists smile at the accidental autograph. The air here smells sharp, metallic, tinged with sulfur. You glance down into a rift valley, red walls split by jagged seams, a plume of steam rising like the earth is exhaling. The floor is dotted with lakes shimmering green from minerals, their surfaces rippling with heat. Beyond, a young ocean stretches, waves gnawing at fresh cliffs. The sound is a mix of deep rumbles and splashes, a percussion section straight from Earth's core. You crouch by the ridge edge, feeling the stone warm under your palm. It vibrates faintly, distant magma pushing upward. Historians still argue how fast Pangaea split apart, whether it was a slow drift over tens of millions of years or punctuated by sudden rift events. You lean into the debate by simply listening. The low growl from beneath suggests urgency, but the scale of continents reminds you that urgency here still measures in millions. The ground trembles again and a rock skitters past your foot, clattering into the valley. You straighten quickly, and the air shakes with the boom of a nearby eruption. From a cone on the horizon, fire roars skyward, a column of ash rising to blot the sun. The plume mushrooms outward, scattering sparks of molten rock. You hear the hiss as lava meets water, a steam cloud erupting like a boiling kettle the size of a mountain. Light joke 1. It's the world's earliest fireworks show, except the ticket includes complimentary ash lung. You retreat downslope, where the land is already reshaping. Black lava sheets ooze, cooling into jagged ridges called pahoehoe and textures rough enough to shred your imaginary sandals. Pools bubble with trapped gas, popping in muffled thuds. You can almost taste the iron in the air, as if the ground itself is bleeding minerals. And yet life creeps in. Around one cooled edge of lava, you notice green shoots poking through the cracks. Ferns, the eternal first responders, unfurl delicate fronds against the black rock. Their persistence is eerie but comforting. Where the earth scars, ferns bandage. Insects buzz around them, scouting the new real estate. To the west, the horizon ripples blue. A shallow sea sprawls where land once stood, its shores scalloped with lagoons. Ammonites wash ashore, their shells clinking like porcelain against stones. Crabs scuttle sideways in tide pools, probing the crevices of freshly birthed coasts. You crouch and watch a fish leap from the surf, evidence that the sea wasted no time in claiming its new territory. Historians still argue whether these shifting seas created barriers that push species to diversify faster. The evidence suggests that as continents drifted apart, dinosaurs, plants, and even insects splintered into regional variations, the beginnings of the ecosystems that would dominate the Cretaceous. You trace the coastline with your eyes and imagine future continents hiding within it, like sculptures trapped in a block of stone. Closer to shore, a group of small theropods patrol the sand, leaving delicate three-toed tracks. They dart after crabs, snapping at them with quick precision. The prints stretch behind them like cursive across the beach, only to vanish when the tide creeps higher. You squat, running your finger across one track, and think of how many future paleontologists will kneel exactly as you are, tracing prints that outlasted the creatures themselves. The evening comes on slow but dramatic. Ash from the eruption blurs the sunset into bands of orange, red, and deep purple. The sea reflects it in shards broken by waves, while the ferns along the lava glow faintly, their new leaves catching stray light. The air is cooler now, tinged with ash but also salt, the strange perfume of a planet remaking itself. Light joke 2. It's like watching Earth play with Lego sets, except every block is on fire and costs a few million years to move. You settle on a boulder overlooking the Rift Valley. The sky above is freckled with ash, stars fighting to peek through. Somewhere far below, magma gurgles like a restless stomach. The world is noisy, volatile, alive with tectonic chatter. And yet, even in this upheaval, creatures forage, ferns sprout, insects hum. Cataclysm and continuity side by side. A bat-sized pterosaur flutters past, its wings catching faint ash glow as it dips toward the lagoon. It snaps up a beetle midair and circles once before disappearing into the dusk. Life does not pause for continents. It adapts, exploits, thrives. Light joke 3, muttered to yourself as you lie back on the warm stone. Earth's remodeling project messy, loud, but hey, the view's amazing. The night deepens, and the ridge beneath you radiates stored heat like a massive stone bed. You stretch out, the rumbles below serving as your lullaby. The planet is cracking, spilling, shifting, but you're strangely at ease, lulled by the certainty that even in chaos, Earth finds rhythm. Night leans in like a friendly curtain, and the big-footed day crowd quiets to a mighty murmur, tails stilled, plates cooling, wings folded like neat capes along the roosts. You feel the temperature slip a few soft degrees, the resin-scented humidity easing off your skin. This is when the small lamps click on. Not firefly lamps, though they wink in the fern hollows like hush-hush signals, but mammal lamps, tiny bodies running hot, whiskers forward, eyes bright with a glow you can almost hear. You step lightly because the night shift has clocked in, and they're working edges and seams the daytime giants don't notice. A rustle under a rotting log, and there, a morsel of a creature, cat-whiskered and shrew-built, darts out to pounce on a beetle. If you blink, you'll miss the whole resume. Grasping digits, flexible spine, triangular cusps along the molars that shear insect armor like minuscule scissors. You smile. The job description hasn't changed much in 200 million years. Find crunchy protein. Avoid feet the size of bathtubs. Mainstream fact to anchor you. True mammals arose by the late Triassic and diversified through the Jurassic, marked by jawbones retooled into a single lower jaw and 3 delicate middle ear bones for keen hearing, plus differentiated teeth that turned chewing into a craft. That tiny ear upgrade is the night crew's superpower. When a termite snaps, someone hears dinner. You kneel and brush aside moss, burrows veining the soil like subway tunnels, each entrance neat as a coin slot. A pair of eyes blinks back, a Morganucatan-ish face with a domed skull and a permanently curious expression. It tests the air with whiskers that telegraph vibration to nerves in crisp Morse code. Historians still argue whether early mammals were forced into nocturnality by dinosaur pressure, or whether their warm-blooded metabolism simply made the cool night a more economical shift. Either way, the graveyard slot becomes a masterclass in stealth and efficiency. A whisper of water to your left, and another shape slides over a pebbled runlet, fur sleek, tail flat and toes splayed. It bumps a stone, dives, and surfaces with something wriggling. You're getting a rare cameo of a docodont type, kin to Castorocota, that semi-aquatic Middle Jurassic specialist with fur impressions, webby hints, and a tail you swear auditioned for beaver understudy. Quirky tidbit: the specimen's fossil preserves guard hairs and underfur so clearly future humans will squint at each strand. Even in deep time, someone remembered a good coat. The night crew isn't just about nibbling bugs in leaf litter. They're testing water, climbing bark, gliding between trunks, tunneling like tiny backhoes. The shift is diversified because the day is crowded. A soft PRRRT from upslope makes you tilt your head. Something sails between 2 trunks, a weightless rectangle of living velvet. It clings to bark with needle claws, patagium snug to its sides. Gliding mammaliaforms like Volaticotherium will one day be inked into stone with their membranes outlined, proving that tri-wings wasn't an idea reserved for the pterosaur guild. Night is the original dark mode for adventurous bodies. Everything looks calmer until someone swoops silently past your ear, and you realize the treetops are a highway too. Light joke 1. Dark mode also saves battery, which is great when your battery is a walnut-sized liver doing overtime. You ease along a game trail, the earth cool and velvety underfoot. Above, cicadas drop their baseline. Below, termites creak the floorboards. The mammal chorus adds faint snicks and snuffles, a sweet design to avoid the radar of anything with a long tooth and longer stride. A shadow ripples, just a Coelophysis-ish hunter checking for movement, and the small shapes freeze, vanishing into negative space like commas you only notice after the sentence ends. The predator passes. Someone breathes again. A beetle meets its destiny. The underbrush fizzes with economies. A multituberculate. Imagine a rodent before rodents are a thing. Hugs a branch. Its incisors like precision chisels as it gnaws a cone scale. Its back feet rotate inward for climbing, prefiguring every squirrel you've ever watched plot a birdfeeder heist. A dryalstoid cousin noshes at a fungus, nose twitching like a haunted doorbell. You grin. The day shift may move continents, but the night shift balances budgets, cycling nutrients, pruning insects, aerating soil with the enthusiasm of unpaid interns who secretly run the company. Light joke 2. The borough HOA is strict. No loud chirping after dusk, and dues are payable in beetle legs only. Something larger for this hour pads through fern shade. Not big, but substantial enough to command a little space. A stocky Utriconodont with knives for molars and the swagger of a creature who sometimes passes on bugs for lizard sashimi. One hapless hatchling scurries. The hunter lines up a pounce. The fern sighs. Night is gentle until it isn't, and then it's quiet again in seconds. You remember a rumor from the future rock record. Reptilian, early Cretaceous scene, yes, but the point lands. Was hefty enough to swallow a baby dinosaur, proof that mammals didn't always wait politely at the bottom of the menu. The night shift has fangs when it needs them. You stop at a bank where glow seeps from a rift in the loam, pale fungus lighting a miniature cavern. Inside, a nursery. Pups no bigger than your thumb root blindly, tiny claws pressing against warm bellies. Milk, the mammal signature, flows in darkness, a private river. Historians will arm wrestle over the exact origin of lactation, whether it began as sweat like moisture for eggs or as immune soup for hatchlings. But here you see the outcome, a system that lets small lives launch fast in a world of heavy feet. The den smells like warm bread with a hint of moss, and you have to resist the absurd urge to knit them little socks. The ground buckles faintly and you brace, then smile, just a diplodocus exhaling in its sleep upstream, the valley's slow metronome. The night crew threads through elephantine dreams without leaving a smudge. One climbs onto a fallen araucaria and pries at ambered resin for trapped midges. Snack and science experiment in one. Another drums its paw pads softly as it listens along a route for vibrations, half sonar, half gossip. A third digs with spade-like fingers you recognize from future finds like Docafosser, a mole-ish specialist whose finger bones will puzzle people until someone notices they're built like modern digging pros. You pause under a snag where a small pterosaur has dozed off, neck tucked, pycnofiber muff like a travel pillow. You can't help the callback to yesterday's runway, plates, crests, capes, and think the night crew would win any quiet fashion award. Glossed noses, whisker sprays, velvet coats, built-in thermal regulation in a world that breathes hot by day and sighs cool by night. Light joke 3. High fashion here is all function. Tonight on the log walk, breathable neutrals and pockets for exactly one beetle. A tawny blur with a tail like a paintbrush startles at your ankle and vanishes under a fern arch. You stand still and let the world fill again. The night is thick but not empty. It's layered with lines of effort as clean as ink on vellum. Upslope, a small cliff face holds burrows like organ pipes, and you picture seasonal calendars pinned behind each door. Breed when the bugs are plenty. Seal the tunnel when the river creeps. Avoid the hours when the long-toothed day crew prowls the hedges. You tuck into the roots of a tree older than your favorite city and watch until the scene resolves into patterns. Foragers fan outward and then spiral home. Hunters ghost across edges and disappear at first alarm. The river sets the clock. The insects set the table. The mammals keep accounts you'll never see. You think of those 3 tiny ear bones, hammer, anvil, stirrup, riding shockwaves of sound. A beetle's scrabble, a hatchling squeak, the leather swish of a wing high above. The apparatus is delicate, but the implication is vast. Hear more, live longer, feed your young, repeat the trick until it imprints on stone. Dawn is still a rumor, a coolness pooling behind the ridge. One by one, the den doors shudder. Whiskers rub against door frames like soft punctuation at the end of a paragraph. You remember the deep rumble of continents unzipping, the flamboyant airshow of pterosaurs, the plate-lit catwalk of stegosaurs. Then look down at the shadow pressed close to your boot and realize the story has always had this counterpoint. Big moves above, fine stitching below. The night crew leaves no banners, but their ledger shapes the next day. You breathe in the loam and resin and the faint, warm scent of fur, and you stay still a moment longer, listening for the last click of a beetle jaw, the last whisper of a tail through grass. The valley inhales. Somewhere a hatchling squeaks and is hushed. The lamps go out, one burrow at a time. You step out of the Jurassic shade and the world's color dial clicks up a notch. The air isn't just green anymore, it's perfumed. Sweet, spicy, musky threads drift on a light breeze, as if someone swapped the forest's cologne for a sampler pack. Petals, actual petals, dot the edges of a stream like tiny flags, whites and creams, blushes and ochres that don't shout exactly, but definitely clear their throats. You're in the early Cretaceous now, and a new kind of plant is rewriting the script in pollen and perfume. Mainstream fact: flowering plants, angiosperms, appear in the early Cretaceous, roughly 130 to 125 million years ago, give or take a few million because rocks keep their schedules in geologic font. Their earliest forms are humble, streams-eyed shrubs, weedy herbs, aquatic slips, yet they bring game-changing innovations. Enclosed seeds, true fruits, and flowers built for partnerships with insects. Darwin will later call their sudden rise an abominable mystery, which is Victorian for wow. Where'd all these flowers come from? You kneel by the water, fingers hovering over a delicate spray of leaves crowned by a simple blossom, the kind of understated star that will one day evolve into magnolias and water lilies. Somewhere upstream, a cousin of Archifructus rattles in the current, all slender stems and primitive floral parts, an aquatic early adopter waving from the shallows. Beetles rummage through the petals like clumsy jewel thieves, dusting themselves in pollen. A thrips, a speck with opinions, trudges across a stamen as solemnly as a pilgrim. Historians still argue whether angiosperms first took hold in wetlands, upland disturbed patches, or along lake margins where flood and sunlight conspire. The river answers with a shrug and a new blossom tomorrow. A pterosaur dips low, eyes catching the glint of insect traffic, and snaps a mouthful of air spiced with winged dust. On the bank, a small feathered theropod tests a flower like a suspicious customer, then decides the beetles inside are worth the effort. You breathe in and get resin and soil, yes, but now there's citrusy zing and peppery undertones, terpenes and aromatic compounds that signal everything from pollinator, over here, to please stop chewing me. Plants are sending text messages in scent, and the replies arrive on 6 legs. Quirky tidbit: ginkgo trees, still gymnosperms, not angiosperms, drop seeds that smell like buttery socks left in the sun. Somewhere nearby, one of those noble stinkers perfuming the path could lure a scavenger, which then lugs the seed elsewhere and ta-da, new ginkgo. Flowers aren't the only ones playing the smell game. The whole forest is a perfumery with mixed reviews. Light joke 1. 5 stars for variety, 1 star for the ginkgo aisle. Would not sniff again without nose plugs. You watch a beetle tumble out of a bowl-shaped blossom dusted head to toe, then lift into the dappled light like a gilded acrobat. It veers toward a second bloom and fumbles inside, a pollen-covered courier making payments between partners. Nearby, a primitive wasp inspects a cone, then swerves to a flower, then back again. You can almost see the evolutionary negotiation: cone or corolla, old menu or new. Coevolution is a slow handshake repeated 1 trillion times, but here in the Cretaceous it feels brisk, like the forest can't wait to reinvent brunch. Plants tune more than scent. Leaves flatten and thin, veins weave tighter networks, growth rates shift. In a thicket, a young angiosperm's leaves shine soft and flexible, growing fast in sun, patches the conifers leave behind. Where pregnancy used to mean a naked seed tucked under a cone scale, it now means a seed tucked into a fruit, sometimes small and dry, sometimes juicy enough to bribe a passerby with sugar. You picture a little herbivorous dinosaur gobbling berries and walking the forest like a four-legged Uber for seeds. Light joke too. Thanks for the ride, payment delivered later, in a well-fertilized package. The insect soundtrack swells around you, beetles, sawflies, early bees or bee-ish things. Future scientists will tussle over which fossils count. Their bodies freckled with pollen grains whose marble-like grooves and spikes look almost designed for cling. Amber will catch these moments. A gnat locked mid-stride across a petal, a filament of pollen stuck to a leg, one unlucky ant plunked into golden syrup, a sticky postcard from the undergrowth. Historians still argue whether the angiosperm rise nudged dinosaur diets and jaw gear in new directions, or whether those beaked grazers were doing just fine on ferns and conifers, and simply added flower salad to the buffet. You catch a small ornithopod browsing a leafy patch, muzzle clipping with tidy efficiency, and wonder how a forest changes when food turns faster, sweeter, more varied. Faster growth means quicker recovery after storms, after fires, after a herd's casual pruning. The forest begins to feel springier, more resilient, like it's humming at a higher tempo. Farther upslope, a patch of early magnolia kin opens bowl like flowers that keep their own hours, warming slightly in the morning sun, trading scent notes as the day wears on. A beetle, dusted and pleased, crawls over a sticky stigma and leaves its golden trail. Light joke 3. Somewhere a Triassic maitre d', remember that world's least successful desert resort, is fuming. You add color and suddenly everybody's booking brunch. You wander back toward the stream and trail your fingers in the water. Petals raft downstream to a shallow bend, where they gather among pebbles and seed shells. The whole edge of the channel twinkles with promise. New strategies, new flavors, new alliances. You think of how many meals in your own century, fruits, grains, spices, oils, trace back to this quiet floral coup. The giants still walk, the flyers still bank on thermals, but the flowers have shifted the smell of the wind. And once the wind smells different, the world is never the same. Wind down, approximately 300 words. So you let the river slow, you let the sounds blur at the edges, and you loosen your shoulders in this perfumed air that isn't loud about its changes, only steady, only sure. The petals drift like tiny boats, and you follow one with your eyes until it settles against a stone, and even then it rocks a little, the current too gentle to insist. The leaf shadows overhead gentle too, making soft lattices that slide over your hands, then your knees, then the water again. You breathe and the breath is longer now, the way you do when sleep is near but kind enough to wait for you to notice it. The scents are rounder, quieter. Resin has a honeyed edge. The soil smells like warm bread. The flower notes are light enough to lift and then return, like the room is exhaling with you. Above, wings fold in and the last bees, if you can call them that yet, finish their slow circuits and tuck into safe corners. The light leans a little, turning the green to a comfortable dusk gold, and whatever hurry the forest had this morning has wandered off down some other path. You settle your palm against the earth and feel that old heartbeat, big and far down, the one that shook the ridges and opened the seas. It's there but softened, like a drum behind a curtain. The petals make tiny tap sounds against the pebbles, almost syllables, almost a story you've heard before. If there's a worry in you, a leftover from deserts or thunder or teeth, it has to step carefully through all this calm, and by the time it reaches the water's edge, it's already forgotten where it was going. Stay as long as you like. The flowers will keep their lamps for a while yet. The stream will keep carrying them. And your breath will keep matching both. A quiet, even rhythm, easy to follow, easy to keep, easy to sleep beside. The floral hush of the Cretaceous dawn doesn't last long. You hear it before you see it. Low thunder, not from the earth but from the rhythm of countless feet. The riverbank trembles, petals shake loose, and the valley reveals its latest headliners. Herds, vast and bustling, beaks clipping, tails swaying. Above them, shadows stalk, teeth catching glints of light, rulers in their own right. The age of dinosaurs is stretching into its most iconic pose. Tyrants and herds, hunters and masses. Mainstream fact. By the mid to late Cretaceous, ornithischians, beaked, plant-eating dinosaurs like hadrosaurs and ceratopsians formed enormous herds, reshaping entire landscapes with their grazing. At the same time, theropod predators, the most famous being tyrannosaurids, emerged as apex hunters. These interactions, herds in motion, predators shadowing, created ecosystems that pulsed like living machines. You step into the press of sound, honks and bleats from duck-billed hadrosaurs, the scratchy chorus of thousands moving together. Their muzzles sweep low over horsetails, scooping vegetation, grinding with batteries of teeth that shed and replace like conveyor belts. One Corythosaurus lifts its head, crest ringing with a hollow call, a low trombone that echoes across the plain. The sound vibrates in your ribs. It's both a roll call and a declaration. We are many, we are moving. Historians still argue what exactly those crests did. Resonating chambers for sound, species-specific billboards, or even thermoregulation. You watch sunlight catch on their shapes, glowing translucent at the edges, and suspect they were everything at once. Voice, signal, style. A rumble passes through the herd as the ground shifts again. Not an earthquake. This time it's a Triceratops herd cresting a rise. Their horns gleam like ivory lances, frills fanned wide in dazzling display. They graze steadily, chewing mouthfuls of cycads, but their eyes stay sharp, alert for movement. One juvenile stumbles, nudges its mother, then regains stride. The family bond is palpable, stitched in every cautious glance, every flank-to-flank brush. Then the hush falls, a shadow on the ridge. The hunter. You lift your gaze and lock onto a silhouette that is both familiar and wrong. Massive head, jaws armed with banana-sized teeth, body balanced over two colossal legs, tail countering like a steel beam. A tyrannosaur, Daspletosaurus at this stage, though its more famous cousin, Tyrannosaurus rex, will thunder onto the stage later. Its eyes gleam forward, binocular, calculating. Every step makes the valley pause. Quirky tidbit, despite the cinematic reputation, tyrannosaurs didn't always roar. They may have rumbled, boomed, even infrasounded like crocodiles or elephants, vibrations you'd feel in your bones before hearing them. As if on cue, the predator lets out a low vibration that prickles your skin. It's not a scream, it's an announcement. I'm here, and I know you're here too. The hadrosaurs shuffle closer, flanks brushing. The ceratopsians tighten their circle, horns pointed outward like a living barricade. You crouch behind a fern, pulse rising, though you're safe enough in this dreamscape. The tyrant steps closer, jaws opening slightly, strings of saliva glinting. Historians still argue whether tyrannosaurs were solitary ambush hunters, pack collaborators, or opportunistic scavengers as much as killers. Here, this one prowls alone, confident enough to test an army. The standoff holds for long moments. The hadrosaur's crests hum, the triceratops stamp, the tyrant measures. Then in a burst of motion, it lunges, not for the armored wall, but for the fringe where a juvenile hadrosaur lagged. Dust erupts, tails lash, bodies scatter. The valley is chaos, trumpeting, crashing, honking, a drumline of panic. You can hardly track it, the predator weaving through the herd, jaws snapping, feet pounding. The hadrosaurs move like a river, surging in waves, their sheer numbers overwhelming. The Triceratopses charge forward, horns slashing the air. One adult wheels, lowering its head, and for a moment predator and prey lock in a primal tableau, teeth versus horn, hunger versus defense. Then the tyrant twists away, unwilling to test 3 meters of sharpened bone against its ribs. Light joke 1, whispered to yourself as the dust settles. Prehistoric rule number 1, don't bring your teeth to a horn fight. The tyrannosaur backs off, sides heaving, tail lashing in irritation. The herds regroup, circling their young, crests still rumbling like aftershocks. The balance holds, the predator hungry but cautious, the herds shaken but unbroken. It's not a cinematic kill scene, but survival rarely is. It's negotiation, bluff, endurance. You step out from your hiding place and look across the plain. The marks of the confrontation remain: churned earth, snapped horsetails, deep footprints like scars. The ecosystem itself is shaped by these moments. Predators test, prey adapt, landscapes bear the traces. Every confrontation writes its chapter into the soil. Historians still argue whether these herds migrated long distances or simply roamed within lush floodplains. The fossil record shows both trackways stretching for miles and dense bone beds where herds may have perished together. Either way, standing here, you feel the immensity of scale. Not just individuals, but societies, migrations, dramas that stretch across continents. The evening falls and the herds settle into slow movement again, the chaos fatting to routine. The tyrannosaur disappears into shadow, perhaps to try again another day. The plain hums with the aftertaste of adrenaline, but also the steady rhythm of grazing, chewing, walking. Life continues as it always does. Light joke 2. Somewhere in the underbrush, a tiny mammal probably just scribbled in its diary, "Dear Burrow, you would not believe the drama today." Above, pterosaur's wheel, catching the last of the sunlight. The smell of trampled ferns lingers in the air, sharp and green. You sit on a ridge, watching the silhouettes of horns and crests against the orange sky, and you realize this is the Mesozoic signature. Abundance in motion, predators probing, prey surging, balance forever teetering. Light joke 3. Call it the Cretaceous version of rush hour traffic, except every car has horns and the potholes could swallow a bus. The stars emerge slowly as the plain quiets and you lean back, feeling the hum of the herds travel through the ground into your bones. The tyrants may roar, the herds may thunder, but together they make the valley breathe like a single living organism. And in that rhythm, you close your eyes, soothed despite the teeth, lulled by the endless march of life. The morning fog lifts not over plains this time, but over a shoreline so broad it seems to have no end. The air is heavy with salt, warm as bathwater, and faint cries echo from beyond the waves. You squint across the expanse and soon the horizon itself moves, long shapes twisting, tails cutting, jaws flashing. The Cretaceous seas have taken center stage, and they are anything but calm. Mainstream fact: during the late Cretaceous, much of the world's land was submerged under shallow seas. North America split in two by the western interior seaway. Europe broke into island chains, and the oceans filled with some of the most fearsome marine reptiles ever to exist. Mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, giant turtles, and ammonites the size of cars. These waters weren't just deep blue canvases. They were bustling highways of predators and prey. You step closer to the edge where chalky cliffs crumble into turquoise waves. The chalk itself whispers history. It's made of coccolithophores, microscopic algae whose calcium shells rain down in such numbers they built entire cliffs. You rub a bit of the powdery stone between your fingers, and it feels soft, almost absurdly gentle compared to the violence offshore. A sudden splash makes you jump. Out in the waves, a dark body arcs and vanishes. Then another. and then a jaw, massive and studded with teeth, surges upward to seize a fish so large it would shame a modern shark. The predator rolls, thrashes, and disappears with its prize, a mosasaur. Quirky tidbit: mosasaurs were close relatives of snakes and monitor lizards, not dinosaurs, yet they grew into apex predators over 15 meters long. Some fossils preserve impressions of scaly skin, showing that they weren't smooth like dolphins but armored in overlapping lizard-like scales. You imagine running a hand over that hide, not smooth rubber but pebbly grit, like sandpaper that eats back. Historians still argue whether mosasaurs hunted cooperatively or lived solitary lives. Watching the commotion offshore, you see 3 of them surface together, bodies twisting in unison as they corner a shoal of fish. It looks coordinated, deliberate, though it may just be hunger pushing them into the same dance. Either way, the effect is chilling. Closer to the shore, you notice long-necked plesiosaurs, heads darting like serpents on leashes. They weave after fish, snapping them up with dainty precision. Their paddles slice water like oars, bodies rising and falling gracefully. Some paleontologists puzzle over how such long necks functioned in open water. Did they help in ambush, striking like snakes, or were they flexible vacuums sweeping through shoals? You watch one arch its neck into a graceful curve and snap up 3 fish in rapid succession, and you think, why not both? A shadow passes over the water, and you glance up, pterosaurs again, but different here. Nyctosaurus with absurdly tall crests, or maybe pteranodon, wings stretched wide, circling like seabirds. One plunges, spearing a fish in its beak before lifting off, droplets scattering like glass in sunlight. The sky and sea are tethered in an endless loop of hunt, feast, and escape. You kneel by a tidal pool where ammonites drift, shells spiraled tight, tentacles groping in slow, deliberate rhythm. Their iridescent shells catch the light in rainbow arcs, mesmerizing. Some shells are smooth, others knobby or spiked, armor against predators. You lean closer and notice tiny hatchlings, no bigger than coins, moving alongside shells the size of wagon wheels. Ammonites ruled these seas as much as any reptile, though their empire would end suddenly with the asteroid's arrival. For now, though, they bob and glide like living jewels. Light joke 1. If jewelry stores existed here, ammonite shells would be the engagement rings, and you'd need a forklift to carry them out. Deeper still, you imagine giants lurking Xiphictinus, the predatory fish longer than a man, with jaws unhinging around prey half its size. Fossils even capture their hubris. One specimen died mid-meal, choking on another fish nearly as big as itself. Evolution's lesson: never order the extra large if you can't finish it. You step into the surf, water warm around your ankles, and hear faint clicks beneath the waves. We're mosasaurs capable of using sound underwater like modern whales. Historians still argue, but the thought makes you shiver, deep rumbling voices echoing in the blue. The sea is less silent than you think. The tide recedes, leaving trails of seaweed on the sand. Among them, you spot the trail of a giant sea turtle dragging itself back into the water. Its shell is wide as a dining table, ridged and weathered. These turtles, like Archelon, could reach lengths over 4 meters, slow but unbothered armored barges immune to most attackers. You watch it vanish into the waves, a floating fortress. Above, clouds thicken, the sky taking on a slate hue. A storm brews offshore, lightning flickering faintly. The waves crash harder, the mosasaurs vanish beneath, the plesiosaurs ride the swells. You find a hollow in the chalk cliffs and huddle there, listening to the storm's percussion. Thunder, waves, the hiss of rain on salt. The smell is tangy, sharp, cleansing. Light joke 2. It's the world's first beach vacation, except the lifeguards are 15 meters long, and you are definitely not allowed to swim. When the rain lightens, you step back out, The sky is coppery now, storm clouds dispersing. A rainbow arcs faintly, mirrored on the sea's surface. Out in the distance, a mosasaur breaches once more, twisting in the air before crashing down in a geyser of spray. The sound rolls to shore like applause. Historians still argue whether these seas were truly teeming or punctuated by zones of low oxygen where life thinned. You stare at the horizon, so alive with motion, and it's hard to imagine barrenness. But the ocean is vast enough to hold both plenty and desert at once, just as the land holds both herds and predators. Light joke 3. If you could Yelp review this beach, the amenities score high: spectacular views, abundant wildlife. But the not getting eaten rating is a solid 0. The sun dips low, painting the cliffs in pink and gold. Waves lap gently now, their fury spent. You sit on the damp sand, ammonite shells glimmering faintly in the tide pools, and breathe in the brine. The Mesozoic sea is a paradox, ferocious and fragile, teeming and temporary. You close your eyes to its rhythm, lulled by the eternal pulse of waves. You keep to the tree line after the storm, letting the trunks frame slices of sky, and almost miss the first shimmer, dark silk crossing a gap, silent as breath. It doesn't look like the leathery kites you watched on the dusk. This is something else, something with veins on the breeze and a different kind of confidence. You step forward and the branch ahead flexes. A shadow tilts, shows a fan of interlocking barbs, and then with a small crisp sound like a book closing, a feathered arm folds. Mainstream fact to pin the moment: birds are dinosaurs, not metaphorically, literally. True avian birds evolved from small, feathered theropods in the late Jurassic and early Cretaceous, carrying forward traits like hollow bones and the wishbone, the furcula, while inventing others: shortened tails, beaks, and refined flight gear. You watch a silhouette hop along a conifer bough and realize you're looking at the beginning of a very long love story between sky and bone. A flicker to your left, 4 wings, not 2. It launches from bark like a thrown scarf, hind limbs wearing flight feathers that turn the whole animal into a cross-shaped kite. It's a microraptor, glossy as a new piano, catching the light in a subtle oil-slick sheen. Quirky tidbit: preserved pigment bodies, melanosomes. In some of these fossils hint they wore iridescent black, a couture choice that says stealth mode but make it fashion. It banks between trunks, tail fan trimming the turn, and lands on a knot with claws that bite bark like pitons. You can hear the faint paper rustle of feathers settling, a private applause. Historians still argue whether 4-winged forms primarily glided trees down or worked in flapping bursts, ground up. You watch this one hop glide hop and suspect it votes, please, yes, to both. The forest offers slopes of air if you know how to lean, and it leans with the instinct of something practicing an old trick made new. The understory smells sweeter now, those early flowers still testing perfumes, and the feathered crowd uses the scent lanes like wayfinding. A small, long-tailed form lifts from a low branch, wings broad, tail vertebrae stitched in a stiff rod that ends in a fan. Archaeopteryx, the Zollnhofen celebrity, a late Jurassic mosaic in living motion. Its hands still show little claws on the wings. Its jaw still carries teeth like pearls with opinions. But when it spreads those asymmetrical flight feathers, the message is all aerodynamics. It glides into a brighter pocket and flicks its tail to keep trim, an aerial comma correcting its sentence in real time. You think back to the pterosaurs and notice how different the wing sounds are. Where skin wings whisper, these feather wings sigh, a dry leafiness, like pages turning in a quiet room. The skeleton under that sound is a marvel: long forearm, shortened tail, ribs with little hooks that stiffen the basket, and the furcula at the center, a springy wishbone that stores energy and snaps it back into each stroke. Somewhere in your mind you can hear a biomechanics lecture, But the forest's version is better. The air itself nods. A flit of pale shapes lands nearer the stream. They're beaked, toothless, with long twin-tail streamers that swish like ribbons. Confuciusornis, early Cretaceous trendsetters. Their beaks snap at seeds and soft shoots, and one taps a cone, head cocked, already inventing the pigeon head bob. Light joke 1. You're basically bird watching without binoculars, which is thrilling right up until you remember your field guide hasn't been written yet. Above them, a different crew perches like ornaments, the enantiornithines, opposite birds, with ankle bones built in a way modern birds would side-eye at a reunion. Their claws still grab bark like miniature theropods, and many wear teeth in their beaks, a look that says smile carefully. One preens a wing and reveals a proper alula, a little thumb feather that trims slow flight and landings, a pilot's flap set into living lace. The argument scrolls through your thoughts again. Historians still argue whether Archaeopteryx truly powered flight or was primarily a climber and glider, whether the keeled sternum you associate with strong flight muscles had evolved in all these lineages yet, whether early birds beat pterosaurs in forest micro-airspace or simply carved a separate niche. You watch an enantiornithine hover flutter to a new perch, and the answer feels like a shrug wrapped in feathers. It depends on the branch, the breeze, the breakfast. You kneel beside a shallow scrape in the sand where wind has cleared the needles. A few contour feathers lie there, barbs neatly zipped, shafts hollow and light. You twirl one gently and feel how it locks and unlocks with tiny hooks. The engineering is absurd in its elegance. Feathers likely begin as insulation and display, little heat blankets turned billboards, and only afterward become flight fans. By the time you're watching them here, the toolkit is mixed and matched. Down for warmth, pennaceous veins for air, banners for saying I'm healthy, date me across a sunlit clearing. A rustle to your right and something small with a feathered crest skitters over a log, a anchiornis like body plan, legs and arms trimmed in plumes, tail flagged. It dashes after a dragonfly misses and does that bird thing where it pretends it wasn't trying. Light joke 2. If embarrassment could fossilize, half the museum would be blushing. You think of the earlier insect symphony and smile at the recursion. Feathers skim air that's thick with wings. Flowers perfume roots that move pollinators, that feed little beaks that spread little seeds. The forest is stacking innovations like a buffet. Take 2, mix, repeat. Even the ground tells a story. Scratch marks on bare soil from brooding dinosaurs in postures modern birds still use. Circles of eggs tended with arms folded just so. A cousin with a feathered crest watches you watching, then settles over a clutch you didn't see, lowering its body until the heat of life becomes a blanket. You can almost hear the tiny peeps that will someday pierce this hush. A soft rain begins and the whole canopy changes timbre. Feathers bead water, then wicket. Some bodies shake all at once like animated pom-poms and send a mist outward that glows in a slant of light. One Confuciusornis hops down to a sandbar, leaves a perfect avian foot, back toe turned for perching, then skitters away as a pterosaur beats past, king of the broader sky lanes. No collision, no drama, just two contracts with gravity overlapping politely. Light joke 3. If there's an airspace authority, it's probably a very judgmental crow ancestor with a whistle. You ease under a dripping frond and consider the parts you can't see directly. Air sacs webbing through the body, moving air one way like a bellows that never wastes a breath. Bones latticed with internal struts that keep strength while shedding weight. A tail shortened into a pygostyle in many species. A solid base for a fan that turns turbulence into control. These are not half measures. There are 1,000 small votes cast for life between branches and the open gaps beyond. As the rain lightens, color slips back into the scene. A tiny throat flashes cinnamon. A wing shows a bar of pale cream. Some colors you can guess from those fossil melanosomes, black, browns, muted reds, others you can only feel. The metallic, the structural blues, the greens that come from light itself rather than pigment. The forest is modest about it, no tropical parades yet, but the palette is widening, like music adding instruments a few at a time. You remember the crocodile cousins with their ambitious forms, the sauropod architects rolling the valley flat, the pterosaurs sowing dusk with capes. This, though, is different in scale and intimacy. The air, so recently a dominion for leather, is now threaded with needles of quill and vein, with turns that can be executed in the width of a hand. The sky is not an empire, it's a neighborhood. A last pass. The Microraptor returns to the same trunk, lands with surgical precision, and folds its four wings until it becomes shadow-shaped like a promise. Nearby, an enantiornithine tucks its head beneath its shoulder and becomes a sleepy knot. The Confuciusornis flock clicks beaks softly, like stones settling in a stream. You breathe, and the breath matches 100 little chests lifting and falling, a shared metronome in the damp green. You might never see a modern city the same way again. Pigeons on wires, sparrows in hedges, herons lifting from canals. They're rehearsing here first, with teeth on their smiles and claws on their perches, writing sky language letter by letter. And you, a quiet reader beneath the line, feel the script imprint gently in the ear bones of your memory. The rain slackens, feathers settle, and the green hush thins into a paler light. You follow that brightness until the shade gives way to air that tastes different, cleaner, colder, with a metallic nip that finds the tip of your nose. The forest around you stretches tall and straight, trunks spaced like quiet columns, needles whispering above. Underfoot, the ground squeaks. You glance down and grin despite yourself. A crust of snow, thin as sugar, dusting the roots and the low fern crowns. So yes, this world of warmth and flowers has edges, and at the ends of Earth those edges crunch under your feet. Mainstream fact to plant your flag. Dinosaurs lived at high latitudes in the Mesozoic, including Alaska's North Slope, Prince Creek Formation, and Australia's ancient polar regions, then much farther south, and even Antarctica, think Cryolophosaurus, the Elvis theropod of the early Jurassic. Their bones, trackways, and even growth rings in fossil wood and dinosaur bones record long winters with months of dim light, polar nights' soft blackout, broken by snow and the slow pulse of seasons. You tilt your face up and imagine that months-long twilight, the sun skimming the horizon like a lazy coin. The woods look different here. Conifers dominate, dawn redwoods and podocarps, ginkgo fans clinging stubbornly, and many trees go deciduous, dropping their needles and leaves to ride out the lean months. The trunks are banded with lichen, cold mint breath rising from bark. You step between them and catch a flash of movement. A small, two-legged plant eater with a long tail, big eyes, and a perky curiosity that feels frankly personal. This is a Leolinosaura-type body plan, an Australian polar ornithopod whose skull hints at enlarged optic lobes, night vision as a lifestyle. Quirky tidbit: its tail was absurdly long, dozens upon dozens of vertebrae, like a furry measuring tape that never retracts. It swishes once, as if counting the trees, then nibbles a fern poking through the snow crust, unconcerned by the breath you just fogged into its weather. You kneel and brush the crust aside. The soil underneath is dark and damp, threaded with roots and the ghost of leaf litter. Here the menu shifts: horsetails and ferns in thawed seeps, bark stripped from low branches, conifer needles chewed to bristly pulp. Coprolites, yes, the polite word for what you think, sometimes show wood fragments, suggesting winter diets that would make a goat wince. You lift a splintered twig and imagine molar batteries grinding it down, then washing it through a gut determined to wring calories from stubborn fiber. Light joke 1. The local cuisine wins points for sustainability, fewer points for chewiness. Cretaceous tasting menu: Come hungry, leave, still chewing. A shadow eases between trunks and you hold your breath. Not huge, not sauropod-sized, sleeker, quieter, with grasping hands and eyes that drink what little light the forest gives. A troodontid-like hunter, big-eyed and tight-footed, pauses to test the air. Its sickle toe lifts and lowers as if ticking off options. Mouse-sized mammal, half-frozen lizard, inattentive bird cousin. The long night favors listeners, and you can almost hear its brain mapping the snow by sound. Historians still argue whether predators like these migrated with the seasons or stayed year-round, adjusting their pace to the dark. The juvenile bones found in polar formations whisper that families were raised here, which makes a 1,000-mile winter commute sound less likely than grit and good insulation. You hadn't imagined feathers would feel inevitable in the cold until now. But once you see the hunter's halo, filamentous down ruffling at the neck, maybe a fuller coat along the belly, your mind clicks. Feathers likely begin as insulation, then become billboard and airfoil. At high latitudes, they are first and last a blanket that moves. The little ornithopod you're shadowing. Bristles along the tail, perhaps a fuzz on the back, fashion and function stitched by frost. The air steals heat without asking. Feathers answer without fuss. The path opens onto a braided stream, black water slipping through white margins. On a sandbar, parallel grooves. A hadrosaur herd passed here, their broad hoofy prints dish-shaped, their tails sweeping free of drag lines thanks to the crust. You follow the trackway until the snow shows scuffed patches where beaks scrape bark. One trunk wears a high girdle of tooth marks like a clumsy necklace. You picture stout duck-billed heads working in a circle, a cooperative bark buffet. Laughter snugs against your ribcage. Somewhere a Triassic maitre d' is still fuming that his desert resort never drew this kind of winter crowd. You tip your face to the sky. The pale band of day thins to lavender, and then the air blooms in green silk. An aurora uncurls over the trees, sheeting and folding with a sound you feel more than hear. Light shivers across ice lenses in the snow, and for a few minutes everything wears cosmic makeup. A hadrosaur on the far bank lifts its head, breath smoking, and you realize the scene would look ridiculous on a movie poster, and yet here feels casually right. Light joke too, nature's mood lighting, because dinner of pine needles pairs best with a tasteful aurora. Near an overhang, fossil wood breaks from a bank, its rings crisp as a fingerprint. You run a mittened finger over them, wide bands for fast summer growth, tight bands for the long, stingy winter. Dinosaur bones from these latitudes tell a similar tale. Growth slowed and started again, a physiological dimmer switch instead of an on-off. Historians still argue whether snow covered these forests persistently or as intermittent flurries in milder greenhouse winters. They argue, too, about just how cold was when no polar ice caps gripped the world. The wood doesn't give you temperature, only cadence. Hurry, rest, hurry again. Downriver, a shape on a gravel bar resolves into a skull crest you recognize from 100 nicknames. The pompadour sweep of Cryolophosaurus. Yes, wrong period for your current Cretaceous stroll, but the continent remembers. Antarctica once hosted that Jurassic Elvis theropod. The fringe fact endures. Even in deep cold light, style emerges, crest for display, species recognition, or simply a strut no one asked for but everyone noticed. You imagine it bobbing in an aurora glow and smile at the thought of preening in a world with no mirrors. You test the snow again, listening. It squeaks differently where the crust thickens, a sonic map for anyone who pays attention. A small mammal pelt glossy, whiskers beaded dives under the surface and reappears near a sedge tuft, pocketing seeds like a pro. The dark months don't hush the system, they rearrange it. Sound rises, color lowers, and the clock runs on scarcity math. Big bodies move farther apart. Little bodies slip closer together. Everything is economical without being joyless. as if the forest has simply shifted to a slower dance. You imagine migration anyway, a late-season column of hadrosaurs stepping south along a coastal plain, juveniles in the lee of adults, auroras fatting behind them. Then you glance back at the juvenile bone beds the rocks will hold, at nests tucked into lee slopes where wind scours the snow thin, at the way those growth rings pause without quitting. The argument keeps its balance on your tongue. Some went, some stayed, some did both depending on the century and the shoreline. The poles, like all neighborhoods, are complicated. Dusk fattens. The trees gather themselves into darker pillars and the snow glows blue in their aisles. Breath plumes trail like ribbons. A small flock of bird cousins, enantiornithans with tiny claws still pricking their perches, settles under a bough, feathers puffed, beaks tucked, turning cold air into blankets one shiver at a time. Somewhere upstream, ice groans. Farther off, a hadrosaur coughs, a deep, orderly sound as if clearing a winter throat. You realize your own breathing has gone quiet to match the place. Light joke 3, a whisper in the scarf of your thoughts. Polar camping tip. Bring layers, bring snacks, bring a long tail for extra blanket if available. You crouch and press your palm to the snow, then to the bark, then to the small warmth of your own sleeve, and the gradient feels like the forest's lesson plan. Conserve, redirect, wait. Where deserts once sandblasted your steps and tropical rivers flooded the world with abundance, the high latitudes teach thrift and sensitivity. They keep the lights dim and the acoustics perfect. If you came here looking for emptiness, you misread quiet for absence. The woods are full, just softer. The aurora thins to gauze. The sky rolls into a deepened violet. You move along the hadrosaur trackway until it fades into shadow and then stop, because listening is the whole point now. Snow crystals tick as they settle. Needles sip air. Somewhere a claw clicks on a stone and stops. The polar night draws a curtain not to end the scene, but to make you lean in. And you do, eyes adjusting, a warm breath in a cool world, sharing a pathway laid down by feet that knew how to live where day forgets to rise. The auroral curtains fade behind you as you follow the seasons back toward warmer latitudes. The snow crust softens into damp soil, the forests thicken, and soon you're breathing air that feels heavier somehow, like velvet pressed against your chest. The Cretaceous atmosphere had its quirks, and here you feel them. Oxygen levels seesawing, carbon dioxide higher than you'd ever want in a modern classroom. The air thick with invisible chemistry that sculpted the way creatures breathed, burned energy, even grew. Mainstream fact to anchor the scene. Oxygen levels through the Mesozoic rose and fell dramatically. By the late Cretaceous, estimates suggest they climbed higher than today, perhaps 25–30% of the atmosphere compared to your modern 21. Carbon dioxide was far higher too, driving greenhouse warmth. This cocktail shaped everything. Giant insects could flutter more easily, fires swept through forests more fiercely, and massive dinosaurs gulped air that moved through bodies designed like avian bellows. A quirky tidbit: charcoal deposits from Cretaceous rocks are everywhere. The high oxygen made wildfires more common, and fossil forests preserve layers of charred wood like pages from an old fire manual. Imagine entire stands of conifers going up like tinder, only to resprout again in seasons, ecosystems trained to burn and regrow in rhythm. You kneel by a blackened stump, run a hand over its carbon-gloss surface, and feel the memory of ancient flames without the heat. The air tastes almost sweet, a tang you can't quite place, like breathing after rain but sharper. You take a step and realize even your dream lungs feel oddly buoyant, as if every breath is turbocharged. For the animals around you, this atmosphere is an amplifier. Sauropods inhale through complex air sacs that snake through their bones, letting air flow one way, never wasted. Theropods share that trick. Even hadrosaurs and ceratopsians carry deep bell-like chests. ribcage like cathedral vaults built to resonate with this oxygen-rich tune. You crouch by a stream where ferns cluster and watch a dragonfly alight on a frond. Its wingspan is larger than the ones you saw in Jurassic shade, a glimmer of how oxygen allowed insect size to nudge upward again. It darts into the air, body glinting copper, wings whirring like a fan. Historians still argue whether high oxygen truly drove gigantism in insects, or whether predators kept a lid on things. Either way, the air here feels thick enough to make wings work more efficiently, like flying through soup instead of emptiness. A hiss interrupts you. Through the brush, a ceratopsian herd shifts nervously, frills catching the light in brilliant mosaics of color. Their breaths puff visibly, not with cold but with condensation in this saturated air. You hear their lungs work, deep and resonant, a chorus of bellows rolling like distant drums. The ground shivers as they move, their massive bodies fueled by the atmosphere's generosity. Light joke 1. It's like Earth turned the oxygen knob up to performance mode, and every creature got an unsolicited gym membership. The trees around you bear scars of fire, blackened bark, cones charred but still clinging. Some conifers rely on fire, cones only releasing seeds after heat cracks them open. You brush one, and a resinous scent clings to your fingers, spicy and sharp. The forest smells layered: pine, char, pollen, the faint musk of animal trails. It's a perfume of combustion and renewal, a system always ready to burn and start again. Historians still argue about the pace of atmospheric change, whether oxygen surged gradually through the Cretaceous or jumped suddenly, sparking waves of adaptation. You stand in the middle of the debate, every breath a reminder that the atmosphere is not passive, it's a sculptor. Dinosaurs with huge chests, birds with efficient lungs, insects with tracheae all play notes written by the gases around them. From the canopy, a cry rings out, avian, sharp, high. A small enantiornithine bursts into view, wings thrumming, tail streaming. It dives for insects stirred by your footsteps, snatching them in quick succession. The oxygen boost turns its flight into crisp aerobatics, every flick of its wing precise. A pterosaur sails higher above, its leathery wings stretched wide, coasting on thermals. You imagine the air itself carrying more lift, every wingbeat cushioned by its density. You pause to rest against a boulder, noticing faint black streaks on its face, soot. Another fire swept here, long before you arrived, and the forest is already reclaiming it. Saplings push through ash, insects crawl over char. This is resilience written into chemistry, ecosystems tuned to burn and rebound like clockwork. Light joke 2. Jurassic insurance salesman returns. Our fire coverage plan excludes acts of oxygen. Sorry. Further along, you reach an open clearing, the ground littered with bones, large ribs, vertebrae, a jaw half buried in soil. You brush away moss and see the hollow struts inside, air sacs etched into fossil. Even in death, the skeleton tells its respiratory story. This was a creature built for a world where air wasn't just inhaled. It was threaded through bone, an architecture of breath. As the day tilts, the air shimmers with heat rising from the forest floor. You hear cicadas begin their pulsing drones, amplified by the dense atmosphere into something almost electric. Dragonflies skitter overhead, ceratopsians grunt and shuffle, pterosaurs cry, and for a moment you feel as though the very air is vibrating with life. It's not just a medium, it's an instrument. Light joke 3. Imagine living here with asthma. You'd probably feel like a superhero. Until the next wildfire, that is. Evening slides in, and the forest smells of smoke again, faint but insistent. A reminder that oxygen's gift always comes with risk. The animals quiet, huddling into groups, breathing steadily, their chests rising and falling in rhythm with a sky so rich it almost glows. You close your eyes and let the air fill you, heavy and sweet, like breathing history itself. The forest haze still tastes faintly of smoke when a new unease prickles your skin. Not a predator's stare, not a storm's pressure, but something subtler, an edge in the light, a tension in the wind, as though the world itself knows a curtain is waiting to fall. You're deep in the late Cretaceous now, somewhere between 70 and 66 million years ago, and though everything looks vigorous, herds moving, seas churning, forests blooming, there's a shadow at the edge of the stage. Mainstream fact: in the last few million years of the Cretaceous, life was thriving, diverse, abundant, noisy. Tyrannosaurs prowled, hadrosaurs thundered in herds, ceratopsians locked horns, ankylosaurs trundled like tanks, and flowering plants were in full bloom. Yet hidden in the geological record are whispers of trouble. Volcanic eruptions in India's Deccan traps, shifting climates, fluctuating sea levels, even a drop in biodiversity in some regions before the final blow arrived. A quirky tidbit: in some late Cretaceous rocks, pollen counts show a sudden decline in flowering plants replaced by ferns, a fern spike. Ferns are opportunists, flourishing after disruption, and their sudden dominance is like nature hitting a reset button. When you see a blanket of ferns, it often means something big just crashed the party. Historians still argue how much of this decline was gradual stress and how much was catastrophe waiting to happen. Was the stage already wobbling, or did the asteroid simply smash a thriving world flat? You walk through a meadow of cycads and flowering shrubs, hearing insects hum, seeing a herd of hadrosaurs browse in peace, and think, it doesn't look like collapse, it looks like everything is fine. And maybe that's what makes the shadow heavier. The sun feels sharper than usual, glaring white in a sky that should be blue. Dust haze, volcanic aerosols. You can't be sure. Off to the west, the horizon wavers with heat, and you picture the Deccan traps in India spewing lava for centuries, flood basalts layering land like black cakes of fire. Ash would have spread, gases would have thickened the air. Some researchers argue this poisoned climate already thinned populations before the asteroid's kiss. Others counter that dinosaurs were doing just fine, herds still strong, diversity still high. You breathe the heavy air and taste the argument in every lungful. Nearby, a tyrannosaur strides along the tree line, jaws parting in a low bellow. Its scales catch the light, eyes glint with confidence. Nothing about its posture says endangered. A small ankylosaur trails the undergrowth, its tail club swinging lazily, a casual weapon against a world that, for now, still works. The ground is littered with petals, bright against the dark soil, as though mocking the thought of decline. Light joke 1. It's like watching someone dance on the deck of a ship, oblivious to the iceberg, the size of a mountain already penciled into the schedule. You kneel by a stream and swirl the water, noticing the sediment runs thick, more silt than you expect. Was erosion intensifying from changing climates? Or are you reading too much into a single trickle? That's the problem with deep time. Every detail might be coincidence, or it might be the start of a catastrophe. Above, pterosaurs wheel in smaller numbers. Once they were lords of the skies, but now birds are stealing niches. You hear the flap of feathered wings from the canopy, sharper than the leathery swish of their cousins. Change doesn't stop, even on the edge of disaster. Some lineages are already preparing without knowing for survival. You find a broad clearing where cycads cluster, their crowns heavy with cones. Hadrosaurs graze nearby, jaws working in endless rhythm. A juvenile bleats for its mother, nudging her flank. It feels idyllic, timeless, until you notice the silence beyond. Fewer calls than yesterday, fewer tracks in the mud. Is it just the season, a local dip? Or is this the prelude to silence on a planetary scale? Historians still argue whether dinosaurs were declining globally or only in specific regions. North America's fossil record shows hints of thinning diversity. Elsewhere, evidence suggests robust populations. The debate sits like a coin spinning on its edge, refusing to fall flat. The air grows strangely still. A shadow passes across the sun, faint but insistent, as if the light has grown tired. You look up, but there's no cloud, only a pale halo at the edge of vision. Your chest feels heavy again, not with smoke this time, but with anticipation. Light joke 2. If you had a weather app right now, it would probably say, partly sunny, chance of doom. You walk further past a marsh where turtles bask, shells wide as dinner tables. Dragonflies skim the surface, their wings catching copper reflections. Life is busy here, oblivious. That's the truth of it. Extinctions don't announce themselves. They slip in while the herds graze, while petals fall, while predators hunt. Only afterward does the silence reveal itself. You crouch by a fern and run your fingers along its fronds, delicate lace-like. These plants are survivors, waiting. After the fire and darkness, they'll carpet the earth again, green signatures on ash. It feels strange, almost cruel, to admire their persistence, knowing what their triumph will mean. As the sun sinks, the horizon glows redder than usual. Dust thickens in the air, mooting the stars before they even rise. You sit on a rock, listening to the distant calls of hadrosaurs, the croak of frogs in the marsh, the wing beats of pterosaurs. It sounds alive, vigorous, unstoppable. And yet the silence between those calls is louder than it should be. Light joke 3. If dinosaurs had therapists, the late Cretaceous session would go. Everything seems fine, but I've got this weird sense of impending doom. The night settles heavy, the air dense, the forest still. Somewhere beyond the curve of the world, a rock is already on its way, invisible, relentless. You close your eyes with the uneasy comfort that no one here knows. They graze, they bellow, they sleep under the stars, unaware that the stars are about to fall. You feel it first as a new kind of daylight, a brightness too white to be comfortable, like the sky put a blade in its mouth. Birds, those small, busy heirs to ancient plans, hiccup in their song and go silent. The wind stops pretending to be wind. The horizon sharpens. And then all at once, a second sun blooms low over the rim of the world. You throw up a hand, useless against a light that arrives before thought, and the air itself seems to flinch. Mainstream fact settles in the brilliance. 66 million years ago, a rock roughly 10 to 12 kilometers across hit the shallow sea off the Yucatan and blew a crater about 180 kilometers wide, Chicxulub. The shock wave tore around the planet. Earthquakes rolled like snakes in the mantle. Tsunamis sprinted across infant oceans and into seaways. A thin line of clay rich in iridium, the rare metal that betrayed the intruder, will one day stripe cliffs from Italy to New Zealand, a planetary underlined saying. Here the curtain fell. You steady yourself as the first pressure front arrives, a physical shove that makes the forest cough leaves. The ground barks, one quick percussive note as if a mountain clapped once. A heartbeat later, grit begins to fall. Not snow, not rain, glass. Tiny spherules, tektites, melted earth flung up and coming down as a hiss of beads. They strike the river with a sound like frying, pocking the surface, dimpling the mud. Quirky tidbit. In some places, later amber will be found with microtektites welded into its skin, little impact stars stuck to ancient honey. Here, a bead lands on your wrist. Even in this dream, you snatch at it by reflex. It cools to a marble with a scar of sky trapped inside. Then heat. Not just summer heat or desert heat, but a rolling radiance as re-entering ejecta turns the upper air into an oven. Distant hills bruise with lines of fire. The canopy dries in seconds. Resins go sharp as knives. Across the valley, a downed log wakes into flame like a sleeper taking a surprised breath. Whether the world burned everywhere at once, or in patchworks fanned by later storms, historians still argue. The charcoal in rocks is a chorus, but the soloists disagree on the score. You step under an overhang as needles turn to cinders mid-fall, and the light outside becomes a red that you feel in your molars. Light joke 1, soft as a mercy. On today's episode of the world's least successful resort, we've added a complimentary broiler setting. It doesn't last as long as it feels. The furnace slackens, replaced by ash that falls like quiet gray rain. The wind returns cautious and carries a new smell, bitter, metallic, like a coin held too long in your mouth. Sulfates, maybe. The asteroid hit gypsum-rich rock and the vaporized minerals become curtains of aerosols. The sun dims behind the veil. Day becomes an underexposed photograph. Nights arrive too early and refuse to leave. An impact winter uncurls. Weeks to months to years of thin light, cold that gnaws at the edges of green. You walk through a muted forest, trunks varnished with soot, ferns flattened into stippled shadows, cones split and scorched, streams look like tea. A dragonfly stutters low, lands and doesn't rise. A small ceratopsian, once a solid little tank in its neighborhood, passes with ribs showing, a cough in its step. The food pyramid flips. Grazers starve first. Hunters run out of grazers. The big bodies begin to bow. You kneel by a patch of dirt where something fragile pushes up. A fern, of course. After a burn, after a blast, after a blackout, they fling green flags. That fern spike will write itself into sediments worldwide, a botanical obituary that doubles as a birth announcement. By a scoured bank, you find a scatter of pebbly glass and a thin clay seam you could scrape with a fingernail, iridium whispering from space dust. You lay your finger there and feel a coolness that has nothing to do with temperature. This is the line that will teach future minds to say KPG. To open textbooks to Alvarez's bold note, to recognize shocked quartz, grains scarred by pressure so violent that crystal lattices forgot how to behave. You slide your nail along the seam and vow not to sneeze, a museum habit learned too late. Light joke 2, the world's worst glitter project. One swipe and you're wearing extinction chic for days. Even here now, the script refuses a single ending. In the hush under the overhang, movement persists. A mammal nose nudges out of a burrow, whiskers wet with condensation. It sniffs, listens, retreats, accounting in a world that rewards small ledgers. Turtles wait in mud. Crocodilians float in tannic pools with just eyes up, old patience wearing new exactness. On a branch that survived the flash, a handful of birds, the ones with short tails and beaks practiced at seeds, hop and tilt, testing cones, testing dried berries, testing anything with calories. Seeds and roots and carrion and fungus improvise a food web built low to the ground. The detritus guild, long overlooked, steps in like the stage crew they've always been. Historians still argue whether the hit came in spring, to judge by fish bones and growth rings at a controversial site where spherules clog gills and waves deposit chaos on a riverbank the same hour the sky rains glass. They argue how quickly darkness fell, how long it stayed, how much the Deccan traps amplified the choke and chill, whether the dinosaurs were already thinning or only toppled because the air went wrong. Debates pack conference halls. But in this dim valley, the answer is mostly simple. The huge economies collapse when the sun closes. The small ones, generalists, burrowers, swimmers, omnivores with backup plans, pay their bills on time. You walk until your calves ache in a world turned low contrast. The big tracks grow scarce. The little tracks draw tight hash marks around burrow mouths and along log undersides. A fungus lifts a delicate parasol from a charred branch and shakes spores like dry snow. On a slope, a bank of ash gives way to green, the first serious fern carpet flashing its resilience like a grin you can't see until it's there. Light joke 3, because gentleness still survives. Somewhere a very tired Triassic Park ranger retires, and the Fern Union takes over maintenance. Weeks, or it could be 100, later the air thins a little. The sky learns a paler blue. The resin smell fades to wood and wet clay. You hear a bird call, not fancy, not loud, just a clean double note that seems almost embarrassed by the echo. You follow it to an open patch where seedlings, angiosperm cousins with fast growth and flexible strategies, stand like hopeful exclamation points. A small bird lands on a twig, crushes a dry fruit with its beak, and swallows the idea of forests to come. The age of dinosaurs as headliners ends in this dim chorus, but the age of life does not end. It folds, edits, starts a new paragraph in the same book. The future wears feathers and fur, keeps the old reptile wisdom in water and sun, and grows a memory for fire. You stand still, letting ash settle on your shoulders like a blanket, and listen to the quiet that follows thunder. In that quiet, you can hear roots taking hold,